10th, 2012. And
Just as we speak.
there they are.
Right on cue.
I did not print out agendas. I apologize for not having printed agendas. But if we can, Dr. Rado, why don't we just kind of quickly...
Well, we have 3
I
copies.
made 3 more copies.
Okay.
Who needs one?
Why don't we just read through the agendas out loud, if you don't mind,
Sure.
so the folks who are here understand what topics we plan on covering this evening.
Is this all your first time here at policy? Or let me just explain then what we do. What we're undergoing in the district is a review of all of our policies. There must be 300 some policies in the school district. And we've also started to add administrative guidelines to that. So we're taking about approximately 5 policies a month as we meet to just review them and make sure they're up to date. When you look at a couple of these policies tonight, some of them the last time they had been looked at was 1987. That's the oldest ones that we've found. In addition to that, this committee's task is also to consider any new policies that are coming forward, and then entertain any discussion on them, and then also take a look at any administrative regulations. One of the things, for the benefit of the board that's here tonight, that Mr. McElmullen and I have decided to do is that in addition to the policies, there's a whole book of administrative guidelines. So what we've started to do now, and we'll have to backtrack to catch up with the others, is instead of bringing just a policy forward for review, we'll bring its accompanying administrative guideline forward for review as well. So it's all done at one time. It's going to slow down the process a little bit because the administrative guidelines tend to be a little bit longer and a little bit more wordy and more process-oriented than policy-oriented. So for our review tonight, we have 5 policies that we're going to review, policies 118 through 122, district testing, homework, instructional material selection, homeschooling, and postseason event competition. And when you see changes in these, again, for the benefit of the public, we don't have copies for everyone to see them, but they'll eventually get posted. A lot of them are just wording updates, and anytime there's something that is of major consequence or change in what the district is doing, we would certainly point that out. But a lot of these are just to update it to come in compliance with current laws and current statutes that may have changed since they were originally passed in 1987. Of interest tonight, there are 2 that are probably more dramatic changes. One of them would be item or policy 122, where I recommended to the board that we take a look at how we budget for postseason competitions and how we prepare for those. And the second one is we had said we would put together some written guidelines to help us implement policy 829 that was recently passed by the board on staff-student communications. So with that...
Well, we have 3 others as well that you didn't mention that we hope to talk about this evening. 121, policy discussion.
Yes. We are adding for new policy discussion, and again, this is based on regulation, extracurricular participation by homeschooled students, which is a policy that districts have to have one. We've been remiss in not having that policy in place. Recently, the State Department of PDE also informed districts that they would need to put in place policies on concussion management and sudden cardiac arrest. So that's what the agenda has on it tonight. The general procedures that happen with policies are that they come to this committee, they get placed on the agenda for a first reading, which allows time for public comment, editing, changing, no vote. Then they get passed on to the second month, and then they're approved and become policy. Same with policy revisions, the same thing. So I hope that's a good overview.
Sounds great. A couple of items I just want to note as well. Mr. Kurtz has been chairing this, and now with some of his other school duties, I've taken over that seat. So I'm getting up to speed with some of the things that Connor was focused on. Where are we in the overall review of all of the policies? Are we a quarter of the way done?
Oh, no, we're only in the 100 series, and there's all the way up to the 900s. When I had told the board that we were going to go through this, I had made it very clear this could take years. This is very painstaking and tedious work. And now that we're going to put the administrative guidelines in as part of the discussion, it might even slow it down a little bit more.
Okay. And to date, we've been going somewhat in order.
Sequentially and as needed with new policies, we've been interjecting them wherever they've been needed.
Okay. Are there any priorities that we should readjust and have some?
No, I don't really think so. As we notice priorities, we just bring them forward, which is why you would have here tonight policy 829. I mean, we jumped into the 800s to put that in.
Got it.
So there's really two facets to this committee. And one of them is that ongoing review of existing policies, and the other one is to bring forward any. Previously, what we used to do, and this committee wasn't even formed, is they would just drop onto the committee the whole agenda. And any new policy, there was no review going on prior to that. So this first part of the agenda wasn't even happening.
Got it.
This new policy, we would only ever have under policy on our agenda anything that was new. We were just not revising policies, which is, again, as you know, last year was my impetus to say we need to do that. So that's where we are.
One additional note, we run this a little bit differently than we run our board meetings for obvious reasons. We have to limit time and with audience participation. But as far as the committee meetings go, well, at least this one that I run, we welcome your participation. So as we talk through these items, it's an interactive type thing, and I'm okay with that. If it gets too long, we'll just move on to the next policy. But as we discuss these, just feel free to interject and interact with us, and that's how we'll get this done.
Can I ask a question? Dr. Otto, could we get a list of all the completed policies that we've done to date? I'm not asking for every single policy, but at least a list, a numerical list of the
If you would want to see that, if you go onto the website on the policy, we have posted every policy and its date of review. So that would be your easiest way to do it.
I don't want the universe of 300 policies and have to check the dates. I want just the ones that we've done.
Well, I can give that to you, but I'm just saying anytime you would want to quickly do that, you can just scroll the very first page of our policies, and it shows you the date where it was newly approved or updated.
Yeah, I know. But that's one thing I want. And then the other one was, and I haven't been to the website to take a look at it, shame on me for not doing so, but we had asked earlier to get all the policies in one PDF file. Like, I've got the book here from when I became a board member of all the policies and all the guidelines. I'd like to get a PDF of all in one, of all the policies in one PDF. That's the website. Have to pull down each policy as a separate PDF document. You follow me?
That's going to take some work.
Well, if somebody actually has all the PDFs in a file somewhere, they can open them all up and they actually create one by just combining them all in one. Adobe does that very easily. I could do it, but I'd have to pull down all 300.
Yeah, we can take a look at that. I'm not familiar with how to do
Lori
that.
or somebody could do that. I'd appreciate it. Because that way I can just take it around with me. I don't have to pull each one down for every meeting and look at them. I can just bring the whole binder with me in one PDF file, which would be a lot easier. Those are my two initiatives.
I also just want to, for the record, invite and welcome Mr. McElmoyle now in his new assignment is assisting with putting the agenda together and also in the research of these policies. So he'll be here to comment as well tonight on what we have here.
Sounds great. Why don't we get started? First policy you have on the agenda for review is policy 118, district testing and assessments.
Obviously, some of the changes that we made here represent the changes in the assessment program since the 1980s. It frankly doesn't look anything like what it did before, but in reviewing this, the only thing that there's actually a recommendation beyond the red lettering that we would like to do.
They don't have red lettering because I didn't have access to the color and copy.
Oh, okay. Well,
but the changes are in italics. The old information, there's lines through it, and the old information that we're keeping is in block lettering.
Got it.
the first thing that we did was change the title of the policy to assessments because that's the language that's being used now. We've made some citation changes in the guide column with Chapter 4. because the prior policy had Chapter 5 listed. The wording that you see there pretty much reflects what's coming down from PDE. This is pretty much closely regulated by PDE. If you look on page 2, under delegation of responsibility, I'm recommending to add a statement that says the following, and this was after Mr. McElmoyle and I met again today. A copy of the entire assessment schedule will be made available to the board annually and posted on the district website for public review, and it's already there. So I'm going to be making
Page 2.
page 2.
18.
It's not there. I'm recommending to add that.
Oh, I wrote it in, and this is the copy.
Oh, they have that copy.
That's my,
all right, so he wrote that in.
That's my handwriting there.
Dr. Otto, are you referring to all of the testing that we do or just PSSA testing?
Standardized testing. This has nothing to do with teacher-made tests in the classroom.
Foresights.
Yes, this has to do with all of that. Yes.
Because right now we're in a situation where the Foresight tests still haven't come, so we keep pushing our testing dates back.
That doesn't have anything to do with this. That's just, it says the district website now contains a link for assessments, and what we're recommending beyond, if you go to Administrative Guideline 118, it's rather wordy. There's nothing wrong with the wording. However, I'm recommending that we actually delete these last 2 pages from the administrative guideline in lieu of having that statement in there that says this information is available annually on the website. Once we determine our testing schedule, it's out there for the public to see. So if you would go to that assessment link on the you don't have to do it now, but just trust me, it's there. It has every standardized test that we administer, when we administer, where it's administered, and information for. It's under our curriculum tab. So I don't think in today's day and age we really need this here, and in this written guideline. I think we can just, as long as we put in that statement that the district will annually produce that link on the website, I think that's the way to go. So that's the only real major.
There's an example.
Pardon?
I'm saying if you list it as an example, and then you have on here, but this list will be updated annually on the district website or such and such.
Well, if I were to add anything to this, I would just frankly go to that website and copy that out and tack it on here.
Yeah, all I'm saying is the guideline, though, points to, once the guideline itself is going to say, we'll point to the website.
No, that's what I said. That's why I added that statement in the policy.
No, I understand that. I guess what I'm saying is leaving this here as an example, as long as you list it as an example, it's not...
That's up to you.
That way, people understand when you look at this list is going to change from year to year.
It does,
what the state does and what the dates are and all that kind of stuff. So all I'm saying is, as a parent, if I was looking at it, I'm kind of curious as to what I'm looking at the guideline. Well, here's an example. I mean, the website's a good tool, but folks are looking at the guideline themselves. It's right here. They don't have to go back to the website or some other place to look for the information. It's there. Saying, here are the examples.
I was just looking at
Iowa's. I guess we're not doing the Iowas anymore.
No, that's a
There's
lot of
lines, we didn't finish it because we
a
decided.
lot of that's been after we started to look at it and take things out. We decided that it's already available. We publish this annually on the website.
Yeah.
So that's how much practice has changed since the last time this was done. So I mean, we can put it on there if you want to continue
Yeah, it
to.
doesn't make a difference to me.
Yeah, probably isn't. Why would you put it on if it changes that frequently?
Well, it has to. It does change annually, and then it changes with mandates from the state. Or if you make a decision like we did at the high school level to take out foresight testing at the high school level, then it would change that year. Either way, it doesn't really matter. It's.
I guess I was just thinking in terms of a list of examples. We talk about assessment vehicles, but what does that mean to most people? Do people understand that that's the PSSAs, it's the SATs, it's the, if you look at the old policy lists examples such as the SATs and so on.
Well, if the majority of folks are going to get to this policy by getting to it on the web, then at the end of the policy should be a hyperlink to this most current.
Well, that's actually something we don't do. That's a good idea. We don't really hyperlink our policies right now.
Well, then at least you remember you have a dependency there.
That's a good idea.
Technically, or
we can add. Then, in lieu of that, that would answer your question, Andrew. That would we could put a hyperlink in. So if you make a note of that, we'll just add a hyperlink to that. then it'll lead to, go
Just
ahead.
to add to your point, and totally agree with you, and I think it's an excellent idea. I would just throw out a suggestion. If these policies have been updated for a number of years, and there's a lot of procedure writing, you want to keep them simple as possible. You don't want to have to keep making changes because you have to go through this formal process to keep getting them updated. So the less you put in there that new requirements
I agree.
continuous updated, the better off you are.
Thank you.
So that's really all we have on 118.
Questions? 118? No. Next one on the agenda is 119.
There's just there's a spelling error on page 2, top, third line down.
Of the
2 is
Policy.
CWO as opposed to 2OW. Right
Yeah,
at the top.
that's Lori. He's just typing these real quick.
Yeah, I know, she's typing quick.
Yeah, I see it, Bill, right here. It says toe instead of two. T-O-W.
good catch.
119, homework?
That's really just, the language seemed a little bit antiquated. We looked at some other policies in other districts, changed this, the reference, the citations. In my honest opinion, I think homework is really left best unregulated real tightly by the board, and I think our original policy left it relatively unregulated, and this just gives some general guidelines. So I don't really have much to comment on.
This is another 1987.
It was originally, I just figured we'd update the wording so that we can at least, you can, I mean, for some of these,
I just had one question.
you can leave them alone.
Yeah, no, I had one question. When I read through this, months ago, and I looked at it, I wrote on here, uniformity of assignments across schools and teachers. And I know we're sort of addressing this in our curriculum overall. I don't know whether we need to address it in a policy or in a guideline, but just that we would strive to have some uniformity across buildings as well as across teachers within a building or across a subject. I mean, you don't want one teacher assigning nothing but essays and somebody else assigning nothing but, I don't know, multiple choice. You're testing the same, different groups of students differently for the same course.
Right. Well, at the high school last year, I had started, there's 10 sections of humanities, for example, 10 sections of US 1 and 2 and so on and so forth, and 3 different teachers. Well, I had them meeting to develop common unit assessments, and that therefore what they would teach in the units would be similar. Now, they had some professional discretion to as far as instructional strategies that they wanted to use, so that could differ a little bit. But
Yeah.
as far as addressing what you just said, essays, one person could give no essays in the past, and another person could have 3 essays. But last year we started to work on that. Now I don't know if they still are.
Right, and we also have the issue that, at the lower levels, I mean, I don't know to the degree that kids go home with homework in the elementary schools. I mean, my kids come home with homework. But, we've got 3-4 different buildings down there. And I don't know whether I don't know what, you guys tell me whether it's appropriate to talk about uniformity across.
I think it is. My only fear is we're so high
for uniformity.
We're so highly regulated. I think we want to leave at the end of the day as much discretion as we can for the teacher at the teacher level. But I don't disagree with your comment. I do agree that uniformity, as long as that has some room for interpretation. I mean, you have some teachers here. I mean, I was
going to say, up at the district office, all the curriculum are there. So in the curriculum, it says assessments in there. So there should be a list of the different types of assessments that could be used to assess a certain unit that they're doing. It doesn't necessarily mean, like you said, one person could do all essays and someone else could do all multiple choice, but that information should be in the curriculum that was written up.
If we're talking homework, I can tell you, I've sat at baseball field and listened to parents talk about how their child who's at one school only did 1 book report all school year, and the same grade level at another school had to do 4 book reports over the course of the year that were projects or paper or whatever. And the question was, well, why did they only have to do 1 when we had to do 4? Because at the age level that it was a lot of parent involvement. At least those parents chose to be very involved in those book reports.
So hearing that, I would think some comment to that effect is probably appropriate.
Yeah,
No,
Dr. Otto, I wanted to mention in the committee, at the high school level, I know last year, I'm not sure if Mr. McElmill mentioned they're trying to change this, or they were trying to change it. Even the health class, I remember, there were 3 teachers who teach that class, and I know one teacher gave out projects and homework assignment upon homework assignment, and one teacher didn't give out any homework assignments. In that class, students who got a grade in that class, it was the same for one teacher and the next. They got the same grade, even though one class had to do a whole lot of homework and the other class had to do no homework. So I do think it would be good to address. Maybe it shouldn't be maybe leave it up to the discretion of the principal to address it, but I do think there needs to be a way to ensure uniformity at least throughout the same building.
We'll work on putting a phrase in that deals with that issue. I think it's appropriate. I just,
all right.
I don't, my only fear is in over-regulating homework. I've seen some district policies, 4 hours a night, 3 times a week.
Yeah.
I don't want to get into that.
Look,
I wanted to ask a question real quick. I've heard from a parent in the community, I heard a complaint that there's an entire building, and I'm not sure if this is correct or not, please let me know. There's a building in the district, I'm not sure which one it is, but they do not have any homework assignments at all. Is that false?
I wouldn't know based on the fact that it's a rumor. I'd have to check that out.
If you can look into that, because if we have an entire building that doesn't allow teachers to issue homework assignments, we talk about uniformity, there's a big...
well, that would be contrary to policy, because our policy doesn't say you can't give homework.
That would explain some of the problems we have in the middle school.
Yep.
It really would.
Well, we'll address it. This committee's here.
that's the reason why I just brought it up. I mean, you to put something in, because obviously if you have somebody make it turn around and say, well, look, show me the policy where it says I can't do this.
Right.
You're going to say, well, I guess it isn't. So you're stuck.
Right.
If we have something in here that says, hey, look, you got to strive for uniformity with whatever the approved curriculum is, okay, well, then you got something.
No, I have. We'll certainly go back to the drawing board before we post that for a first reading.
That's a very touchy subject. These are policies, very high level. So where do you really want to manage this type of policy? At a policy level, do you want to leave it dependent on schools? You put it at a high level policy that's going to be scrutinized across the board. Then, to Dr. Howell's point, you could have an administrative nightmare on your hands now trying to keep everybody in sequence with a policy that really probably should not go after that level of detail.
I'm comfortable with the level of detail that we have now. It just says basically we have an expectation that homework happened, and then it's up to the teacher to do it. And then at the individual building level, we need to monitor what's happening based on some of the comments that you're sharing.
Certainly you want to address this issue of workload, I mean, and type and structure.
Right.
I mean, obviously, independently of this, there's been an effort at the high school and elsewhere I've heard it from the teachers telling us that in some of our board meetings, where they're trying to bring the overall curriculum together so that it's being taught at Birdsboro, the same thing that's being taught at Amity, the same thing that's being taught at Monocacy, which is fabulous, what we should be doing. But I think memorializing that in some fashion
Absolutely.
is
Well, that was a directive of mine the day I walked into the district, and I met with the elementary principals. I said, I don't want the Birdsboro School District or the Monocacy Elementary School District. We're all Daniel Boone School District, so we have to be doing things in a uniform way as much as we can, with again, not squelching the teaching process and the teachable moment where some assignments may be more appropriate for certain things based on the teacher's style of teaching, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't see an issue.
I was going to say, if this is something that you're going to try to put in there, just from a teacher standpoint, if there would be any way during an in-service day then that we would have time for like all the 5th grade teachers to come together and discuss this kind of thing, because I'm at the middle school, so I don't have that, but I know with the different schools you don't have time to get together, and that would be an excellent way to use an in-service day.
Well, I just want to make it clear, this policy will not overregulate anyone's life. I mean, let me read a paragraph. This is basically what this policy says. Homework shall complement classroom instruction to be planned and evaluated with respect to its purpose, appropriateness, and completion time. The demand of homework upon the student's time shall be consistent with the best interest of the student in regards to other valuable experiences to be gained outside of school. That's not going to handcuff anybody. I think it's appropriate and it serves the purpose.
I just want like a one-liner.
Absolutely. No, I get you.
The district shall strive to make sure that assignments are uniform across across buildings and classrooms or something to that effect.
No, I think that's well.
You're not hamstringing anybody
Right.
putting that in there, but you're saying, hey, look, as an administration and teachers as a group need to, work towards, getting that done, making sure that it is a uniform experience. That because you went to, I don't know, Monocacy as opposed to Amity, your experience at
Right.
David Boone is relatively the same.
Absolutely.
There's going to be some differences, but it shouldn't be monumental.
So we'll bring that forward with that. The next one on our docket is instructional material selection. This is just a policy that the board's had in place for a long time. We continue to follow this process in general. We did insert the word technology because that hadn't been written in the policy. And we also struck out the notation to section 5.7 of the State Board regulations since that doesn't exist anymore. We also took out a statement on the second page relating to what used to be, if you remember the old OBE, the outcomes-based education, that's not even in place anymore. So the materials back then were supposed to be related to that outcomes-based education. So we took that out. The guidelines, the only thing that we took out, again, relative to that was the reference to PROBE, which was providing realistic outcomes-based education. That really goes way back. So that's gone. But the request anybody would want to review instructional materials, we can allow that under the school code. That is by a resident. If they want to do that, this form can be made part of that review process. But the whole selection and review process is something that parents are allowed to do under the school code, and that's what this policy really reflects. And we'll have Mr. Subers review it again to make sure it's consistent, but we believe it is as it's presented here. In some cases, just for the members of the public, there will be policies. We're running them through whether they need a change or not so that we can actually say our policies always have stamped on them a date adopted, a date last revised, and then a date last reviewed, so that when citizens go to the policy section, you can see, oh, this was just looked at. So this one is, I think, lacks controversy and is just really kind of a procedural thing.
How big, I guess we're wondering is, I've been on the board 5 years. I've never even seen what it is that's going to the classroom in terms of instructional material, textbook, or anything else. I don't know whether we should, outside the policy or something else, but maybe as a board, I don't know, every now and then, every 5 years or whatever it is you guys are looking at new material or adjusting what it is you're doing, bringing that material in front of the board. So I'm sure in the 5 years that I've been here, new textbooks or different types of curriculum, instructional material have been chosen, but it's never come before the board for our opinion or consideration.
My recommendation would be that this really falls into the area of, this is implementation of curriculum. Mm-hmm. So your first pass, like if we were saying, well, we're going to buy these new fancy phones that help teach something better, they should probably come in front of the curriculum committee so that they understand how they're going to be implemented to deliver the curriculum of the school district.
I thought that this were available for us to review.
That's already another policy. That's books.
Okay.
This is instructional materials.
Okay.
This goes a little bit, if you know that this is like reference books, other supplementary titles. This is, you notice this doesn't say textbooks. There's already a textbook review policy. This is for all that extra stuff, library books, technology, other instructional materials. Many times teachers will buy, beyond the textbooks, maybe a kit that they'll use for something, or in the modern era here now, we'll get some software to do something. If the board so chooses, when we purchase that, you certainly would have the right to review it. Most of that stuff, to Andrew's point, doesn't really ever come before a committee or the board, but it is subject to review by anybody if they would certainly want to see what it is.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, what caught my eye was paragraph 4 of the second bullet point, which said, wherever possible, material shall provide major opposing views on controversial issues so students may develop under guidance the practice of critical reading and thinking. Now, if this is just applying to, I don't know, maps, and technology. I can't imagine what's going to be so controversial, but
No, you know what
if there's
happened?
something else in there that's controversial. I'm just wondering.
Well, it might be books right here in this, like on the library.
I'm just wondering at what point does the librarian, I don't know, come to the board and say, hey, look, we're putting something in here you guys ought to be aware of it, and what's your opinion on it before we move forward with it?
You
Or
would
should
have.
they ever? I don't know.
You have the right as a board to approve anything that sits on these shelves.
I get it, but as a board, it never comes up.
No, and it hasn't been part of our process since I've been here. And in many school districts, I haven't seen a lot of that.
I mean, this was a big deal down in Texas.
Oh, absolutely. That's what I was going to say. In some areas of the country.
I mean, literally a war was waged.
Absolutely.
Over the type of material that was being used to instruct
Absolutely.
kids inside the classrooms. And, here, like I said, I've been here 5 years. I've never seen anything. And I don't know whether that's, maybe that's my fault for not coming down
It's
here.
problem, no, it hasn't come.
The process of new material coming in can go through curriculum and instruction or go through the board. But
Frankly,
what's in existence today? I mean,
Yeah, I don't know.
if that was 6 years ago, you missed it because you didn't come on until 5 years ago. So how do you
I don't really think there was
all those things?
Well, you're the historian here tonight. What had been done in the past?
Andrew's,
Sorry to put you on the spot.
Andrew's correct. I mean, it never really went to the board, but I think the librarian could produce a list of what she intends to buy with the money that was allotted for new library texts that she's going to buy for the board to preview before they're purchased. I don't think that would be that difficult for a librarian to do.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of materials like, to this man's point earlier, we don't want to get too specific. Teachers may read something on the internet and they think, wow, to your point, that this is a good counter argument to the article that I presented earlier in the week, and they have to have the professional discretion to put that forth, knowing that there's parameters. It can't be, inappropriate materials. And that would be their guideline. But there's oftentimes high school teachers are pulling stuff together, and maybe at middle school and elementary at the last minute when they find something that is current and relevant to issues that they're teaching in English and social studies classes, and science too, to your Texas point.
Yeah.
The purpose of this policy is really for that parental challenge to something, but it does have other uses beyond that. If you look at the administrative guideline attached to it, there is a list of criteria that I and you by proxy are supposed to be following for any materials that we bring forward. If you look at number 10 or number 8, value commensurate with product cost, where you would say, no, wait a minute, you know what, it's $10,000 per little device here. Is that really worth it to get across your point? So we as a board and an administration would have a right to look at a request from a teacher to say, you know what, that's not giving us our bang for the buck.
Well, now you bring that up, it does remind me of one technology budget where we had, if Mr. Jacobs hadn't actually itemized everything, it would never have come up if we had just gotten a lump sum budget. But because he presented it in the way that he did, it gave us an opportunity to question what some of those things were.
Right.
I forget which one of them was. It was some machine that would wheel into the classroom that let you telecommunicate with some other school somewhere. And it was a $10,000 machine.
Oh, the rovers. I think you're talking about the rovers.
Well, how often is that used? Once every 6 months? That purchase had been made previously, right? It never come to the board according to these procedures in some way. I guess what I'm looking for is this doesn't take any power away from the board to have the right to review, but it doesn't prompt anybody below that level to bring anything up to our attention either. Mm-hmm. It's saying, look, you guys should be reviewing this once, I don't know, every 5 years, or once every time some major new purchase is being made, or once every time there's some sort of shift in a new
I
series
think
of books or something. I'm just wondering whether this one and the other policy refers to actually whatever it is, textbooks, need to have something in there that's a little bit more proactive in the sense saying, look, the administration needs to be cued to say, okay, look, a board, you need to be aware that we're going to be doing this.
Well, I think what we would have to, you're speaking, when I think of reflecting on what you're saying, I think of process. So,
and I don't know where you would reflect that process in a guideline. It doesn't necessarily have to be a policy.
No, I think a line item in here that says, because it doesn't say this in here, because these things are generally purchased during the budget process, before the bids go out and things like that, they should probably be put in front of the board for review. You may choose to review them very closely or ask me to review them and give recommendations, and that would be the process. I currently don't engage in that process now. I'm assuming that the building principals are probably engaging in that process at their level.
And I remember Anne Marie was
Right.
up to her eyeballs in this stuff,
Right.
And that's fine. I don't know. I just wonder, is my role as a school board member, that'd be one of the things that comes to my attention every now and then. During a specific terms of 4 years. Does it have to happen every year? No, but maybe once every 3 years or something like that, it comes up so that
why don't
every
we
gets to get their finger on that once or be introduced to it once.
We can raise that question when we get it for the first reading in front of the board, and we have time to make edits if we want to put something in there that deals with that issue.
Frank, what do you think?
Yeah, no, I think it's great if we can find a way to do that reasonably. And you're talking about quite a bit of information.
That's my other,
and I'm not
to his
suggesting
point.
that we have a board sitting here reviewing every book that comes forward, and who's going to have the time to do that? That's what we pay everybody else to do.
Right.
I guess I would be, if anything, I would be interested in censorship. Like you always say, it's got to be appropriate material, and I think we all kind of know that. But is there over censorship that we need to be aware of? That somebody's making some decision not to include some material that we think is appropriate and should be considered. I mean,
if that would ever happen,
but we've seen that in other school
they
districts.
would always have the right to bring that issue to the board, and I'd have to look at it, but I think under the book there is a process by which you can challenge. There's, like he said, the wars in Texas that they've had over challenging certain textbooks being in the schools.
Are the department chairs aware of everything that's purchased from the teachers? Like, do they take that information to the chair and, tell them?
I'll defer that to Mr. McElmore.
Yeah, because the department chair would put together at the high school the science budget. So each individual member, there's 12 people in the science department, submits that to the department chair. Mm-hmm. Department chair submits it to the building principal. And we go from there, but it's really looked at from a financial perspective usually, not the details. Being the principal for the past 15 years, I didn't really delve into the text, not textbooks, but let's say pamphlets and stuff like that they would want to purchase.
But if they take it to the chair and the chair has a chance to look at everything, and then would they be able to report out to the board once in a while, like what their teachers are showing their students, like how they're presenting a pamphlet? Is that something?
I think that would be a good. The curriculum and its curriculum committee would be a good venue for that, and it's rather than the whole board.
Now you're talking about chairs. That's up at the high school, but like at the middle school, we don't have.
You don't have a chair of the department.
We don't have team leaders anymore. That kind of dissipated a couple of years ago.
Most of that's left to the discretion of the principals at the elementary level. They work that out that way administratively.
Well, then who would they go to in the middle school to present their material? Just the principal then? So then the principal might want to put something together to present to the board or present to the curriculum committee on what teachers are showing students, so that we're aware of what's going on.
I mean, the other thing, and I know everybody works during the day, but I don't think anybody would care if people came and sat in on classes even. I mean, the principals kind of randomly show up anyway.
The one thing that to your point, Andrew, that we're probably not doing, and this is what I mean, you as a board can choose not to follow your own policy, but it says no adoption or change of materials shall be made without my recommendation and then by a 2/3 vote of the board. So there's already a procedure in here that we're kind of not following.
Yeah, I mean, I read that, but I guess the way I interpreted that was
to require us to do that would require us to give you an exhaustive list of everything that we would be purchasing that's new.
And what about the things you don't purchase? Like YouTube videos,
Right.
or
And that
TED Talk,
and exactly, and that speaks to a whole nother realm that's not addressed in this policy.
Okay.
This is just purchased instructional materials that that come before the,
Well, actually, the way I read this, Dr. Adams, it just says the superintendent basically has the authority, except if 2/3 of the majority of the board decides to step in and do something about
Right.
it. So, in essence, a superintendent could never float something in front of the board. Everything just being done with a recommendation. And if the board gets wind of it and doesn't like what that superintendent's recommending or not recommending, then it takes 6 board members to step up and say, hey, we're all going to override the superintendent on this one, and we want this, or we don't want that, or whatever the case may be. But if the superintendent never brings it up, then the board never knows, right? Unless by virtue of being a parent or somebody else brings it to your attention, you know.
Yeah, I'm not sure what what they were thinking back in '87 and '88 when they put this in there. I just know that under the school code, parents do have a right to challenge materials.
Sure.
How we work internally is left to our discretion.
I guess I'm just wondering, while we're looking at this, and whatever the other one is that refers specifically to textbooks, if there's, I don't know, maybe other school districts have addressed it. Maybe there's some, that says, hey, look, every so many years there's going to be some sort of review by the board of material. I just want something proactive and that it throws this up to our level at 30,000 feet every now and then, because as a board member, I guess I always sort of thought when I got on the board that was just sort of one of the things that we would do. I've never done it, and quite frankly, maybe I was just misguided and naive because I haven't done any of the things I thought I'd be doing as a board member before getting on the board. Everything else has been something else entirely.
Hey, is that what you expected of me?
Yeah.
It's all what you make it.
But when you read, typically in the press, you hear about boards, being involved with, whatever, curriculum and test scores and having their eye on these types of things. That sort of stuff has never really come up with us. So just think about it. That's just something that...
Yeah, we can go back and take that commentary and maybe work something in that puts this in front of you on a maybe an annual basis at least, to say that...
Annual may be too frequent. I mean, if nothing's changed, why do we need to have it thrown in front of us again?
Well, to be quite honest with you, these materials are ordered on an annual basis at budget time.
Yeah, but second edition, third edition, 17th edition of the
Yeah.
same book, they're just updating things. I guess what I'm sort of at is,
Well, let me talk with everybody and we'll come up with
and more to
a
Frank's
review
point,
process.
The issue of censorship. Somebody doesn't like a particular type of book because it may be controversial or it might have a language in it that somebody doesn't like. But it's part of American culture. It's part of, it's been taught for 50 years now. Somebody says, oh no, we're not teaching that anymore. If that decision made down here and it's never even being brought up to the board for its consideration, I mean, maybe that's something the board would want to weigh in on before that decision is made. I don't know, but
We'll take a look at that. I'll make a note here on that.
maybe other school districts have different ways of handling that.
Also, the point that was raised from the audience, which was good, it's not clear to me that this is just purchased instructional material. I mean, that's a really good point. What if the teacher's bringing in material that's not being purchased, whether it's through something on the internet or YouTube, like you said? Or
That's where the guidelines.
How's that being addressed?
The guidelines address that, like number 5 on the first page, appropriateness to ability levels, appropriateness to content. That is where then the building principal would be, hopefully through looking at lesson plans, and the lesson plan hopefully is detailing, well, I'm going to pull in, like in science class, actually in chemistry, with the smart board observing some chemistry teachers where some of the experiments were too dangerous to do in the classroom, they through the smart board got a short clip of a college professor performing the experiment. Actually, I wouldn't have known that unless I was observing the teacher that day, because she didn't put that in there. They would have a lot of detail to put into their lesson plans. They put their main objective, so that's hard to monitor. Usually, unfortunately, we're reacting to something when someone does select something inappropriate. Then the kids take that home to the parents, and the parents call the principal up. And so we're reacting rather than knowing ahead of time. And teachers have asked me over the years, is it okay if I show this film? And I would say no on many occasions. You're not showing it.
I mean, should that be a hard and fast policy if it's not clear that prior to a teacher doing that, they just have to get the approval of the principal? Wouldn't that make sense?
I think that would be a good thing.
I mean, it's all good intentions, too. I mean, a teacher could have great intentions, and they do something like many of them do, and they come in and they bring it in, but it's totally uncensored. You have no idea what that is until, like you say, it's too late, and the damage is done, and then you have to hear from the parent.
I think, I think process, and I think to the comment out here, I think the YouTube videos, and I think everything is covered here when it says all other instructional material, because by default in today's age, that is instructional material. So I think that part of it's covered. I just don't know what vehicle you could do if on a daily basis suddenly a math teacher found some great new YouTube last night that it can't come before the board by the time they want to use
not the
it.
Board, not the board, but why? It would take 5 minutes to talk to the principal.
I don't think math has changed so much in so many years that there's going to be something controversial about it.
Well, no, but they might find there might be somebody singing a song about how to do a division.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, like whether it's social studies or it's history, revisionist history, or some other type of history that's being taught, or sex education is always a hot button. Those types of things.
Right.
Where somebody says, this. It may not be offensive to me, so I'm going to bring it in. I'm going to, but it could be offensive to 17 other people, in that classroom, or a particular religion, or a particular race, or whatever the case may be. And so I don't know what the filter is in the review process, as Frank's saying.
And if I were a teacher and I found some material tonight and said, boy, this would be great to show my students. Well, instead of showing it to them tomorrow morning, maybe I have to wait till Friday morning because I have to show the principal Thursday. I mean, who's going to get hurt from that?
Can I just intervene on this
Sure.
real quick? At the beginning of every year, every teacher has to sign the acceptable use policy of the district, which states that we will use technology in an appropriate manner with our students and everything else. So that, and that's something that it's not we sign it the first year that we come on board. That's something that we sign every year. And I don't
That's
know if
by
it's
law.
Right.
That's by
but
law.
I'm saying
Determining appropriate use. When you're at home at night and you look at something, you're making that decision whether it's appropriate, and you're immediately showing your students.
Right.
That's not right. It could be inappropriate. I mean, there needs to be someone saying.
At what point do you have to trust your teachers and the employees that you hire?
Well, you trust them all day. You trust them all day with your
students. So you might have
students.
to trust that sometimes
But
they're going to have to make a decision and they're going to show something, and they have the best of intentions.
Exactly.
And one child goes home and complains, there has to be some trust that the teacher made that decision based on their knowledge of their classroom, the materials that they're teaching, and whatever it was going to provide in addition.
I think there's total trust. My feeling is there's total trust with the teacher and how the teacher would present that once it's agreed that it's something to present.
I'm not even sure of the issue that we're discussing. I think it's getting away a little bit from the intent of this policy.
It is, but some topics were, some...
No, I'm not trying to shut down the conversation. I'm just saying as far as getting through this policy, I don't know that I could even reflect a lot of the conversation in the body of this policy.
I think where I was going initially was, at what point does decisions that are being made down here rise up to a board review? Because what the policy way it currently states is if we're aware of it, we can step in and do something about it. But if we're not aware of it, then we're not aware of it.
No, let me go back and
going on. So
we can do a little more research on.
And maybe there's other vehicles out there that other school districts are using that somehow automatically kick things up every now and then for the board to get a look at. Because after all, we represent the taxpayers of the school district, and so we have a vested interest in how things are being taught here, or what's being taught here, and how it's being done. I'm not suggesting micromanaging teachers. That's not what we're here to do. They went to school to become a teacher. I didn't. So I'm not interested in getting into that level, into the weeds saying that. But as a sidebar to this conversation, I don't think the issues that have been raised in terms of, what internal policies or procedures do we have beyond these guidelines that sort of provides a check and balance that gives somebody to say, hey, look, wait a minute, before, and I'm not saying we do this here, but I do know of other schools, hey, before we start handing out condoms to kids in health class, maybe I ought to sit down and talk to the principal about that. Logic would dictate that, but,
doesn't always happen.
It doesn't always happen, right? So people may have an issue with it, or I don't know. So I've just seen this happen in other school districts, much larger school districts, usually countywide systems in Virginia and Texas and other places. But, you know, if it's happening there, it can happen here too.
Well, we don't have to, I mean, we'll go back and we'll put some ideas together and try to address, again, I think it's that review process. There might be some other policies that are handling some of the other issues that you're bringing onto the table.
Yeah, maybe they do. I don't mean.
We haven't gotten
I'm
that
just
far
raising the
yet.
idea. You guys think about it, and you know, come back with good construction.
Yeah.
Huh?
Good constructive conversation.
Yeah.
Real quick, everybody that was saying about the Bible being in the library, which is my information.
The Bible's being in the library? I don't know if we have one in the library or not, to be honest with you.
You have 3 or 4 right here. Okay. Does anybody ever think that I'm not
No.
the story or anything?
Not in
Nobody's ever
my
said
19 years.
it? Okay, nobody's ever. All right.
It is the most popular book in the class, so.
And you figure all areas of religion at some point are touched on in the curriculum. So, yeah, I mean, just religion is hit.
And we are sitting in the middle of the reference section.
It's not illegal to have a Bible in a school. It's illegal to try to teach
No, we're
it.
sitting in the reference section.
It's not illegal to have it in a school. It's illegal to try to teach it.
Okay. Moving on. Is that we okay with that?
I don't. Yeah, that'll take some further review.
Okay. 121 is our
You
next.
thought that was a slam dunk, didn't you?
No, actually, no. I never think that. Come on, you know better than that. The next one should really not generate a whole lot of conversation.
There we go again.
Yeah, you don't need to. You're just
Actually, this is one area where I covered this in writing my doctoral dissertation, this whole topic of compulsory attendance and homeschooling and this and that. This policy is fine the way it is. Believe it or not, even though it's as old as it is, it's been on the books for a long time in the state of Pennsylvania. There is nothing in here that needs to be changed. This, for background, is what students whose parents choose to homeschool them. These are the rules and regulations that they have to abide by in order to make that happen. So,
Do you know how many kids are being homeschooled?
you know, I honestly, I didn't anticipate that question. It's really not that many. The number has really changed recently as well with the availability of cyber school and charter school options for parents. But this is strictly homeschooling, and if you're homeschooling, you're doing what's on this paper.
After reading this, I thought to myself, I could never do it. I
couldn't do it.
It's
When I was
work involved.
When I was at Twin Valley, for the time I was there, Twin Valley had the highest percentage per capita of the percentage. It might have even been the highest number of students who homeschooled, because I used to spend my summers with portfolios stacked this high because it was the district's responsibility to review them and check off on them.
I mean, you know, who's doing that review now here in our district of the, I don't know, what number of students there?
Is that with you now?
It will be me.
Has that traditionally fallen to the principals? Of the
It
different
was
schools?
when I guess a number of years ago, it was divided up, different duties that are now been put into this position on it. The Birdsboro principal had it for the past number of years, Mrs. Kasem. So she has a couple of boxes over there with all the portfolios, which are evaluated and signed off on, and then the parents get them back. So they're not there, but there was a couple of copy boxes filled up with portfolios, which are pretty thick.
Yeah.
So at the end of the summer, I went over there to see, what the process was and what the portfolios looked like.
Yeah.
Parents never really understood that they only had to submit this much, but they were so proud of the work that they did, they would literally bring in boxes of their work, binders and binders. I remember the Mennonite population down in the Morgantown area is a little bit larger than it is around here, and they're really a lot of the followers of the homeschooling movement, and they would bring their stuff in. I mean, they would literally bring it in boxes. And I tried to get to the point, I said, I really don't need all this. I can promise you I'm not going to read all of it. I don't want to insult you, but all they have to do, and if you follow the policy, they're only actually somebody else outside of the school is required to sign off on it and say, this is done. The school really reserves no right under the law to say this is inferior work even. It has to be the supervisor of the home education program who has, I actually as the director and my role at Twin Valley thought some really shoddy work was turned in, and I went to my superintendent at the time and she said, there's really no provision in the law to even challenge it. So whatever they turn in, they turn in. And I'm not saying most of the homeschool families are actually very, very conscientious about the work that they do, and but from a policy standpoint, this can just be stamped and moved on. I can talk for hours about the actual homeschooling experience, but maybe we'll save that for another time.
You okay? Moving on? Okay. 122.
Well, you know what? If I could,
The 121.
I'm going to jump down to the new policy. One of the things that we were remiss in not having on our books was a policy that changed the no pun intended, the playing field for extracurricular participation by homeschooled students. Prior to this policy, which was passed by the state government in 2006 under the Rendell administration, they made it law that districts had to put into place. I guess somehow I wasn't here in 2006, so I'll just wash my hands of that. It didn't happen. But it's happening now. We're putting this policy in place because we're supposed to have it. And basically what it says is you are to allow students who are homeschooled, if they approach the district, to come in and participate in our extracurricular activities under all the same rules and regulations that our students who are enrolled in our school do as well.
This does not include cyber.
No, that is a completely separate entity. Okay. And for the benefit of the public that braved coming out to this sometimes tedious conversation, there are 3 ways to satisfy compulsory attendance, or 4 ways to satisfy compulsory attendance in the state of Pennsylvania. Obviously, one of them is public school attendance. One of them is private school attendance of whatever private school of your choice. In 1997, the state passed the charter school law. It didn't include cyber charters at the time. It has morphed into that. So charter schools are another way. And the 4th option is homeschooling. Between the ages of 8 and 17, all Pennsylvania residents are required to be in some kind of schooling. It has to be one of those 4. So the public school, there's a 1929 Supreme Court case that said in Oregon they tried to force people to go just to public schools. That law became Supreme Court law back in the 1920s, and since that day, across the country, states generally have similar laws to what Pennsylvania has, that you can satisfy. The compulsory attendance age in Pennsylvania is 8 to 17. So that's the other interesting thing. Back when you go to the homeschooling policy, many of the homeschooling families would never, their first portfolio comes in when the kid's 8 years old. Not when they're 5 or 6, because they don't have to come to the school. And at age 17, they don't have to keep turning them in, they're done. So I always like to tell people, since there aren't any students here, a student can sign themselves out of school the day they turn 17, parents. There's not a thing you can do about it other than exert your parental influence on them. But there's nothing legal you can do to them the day they turn 17. Pennsylvania, they can sign themselves out of school. When I was principal, I used to tell.
I've known that when I was 17.
Well, you know, Bill and I have both been high school principals, and we'd have conversations with students. We'd say, you know, nobody's making you come back here anymore. It's up to you and your family now. But if you want your diploma, you're going to stay till you're 18 and get all your credits. So, at any rate, that policy, I think, obviously needs to be on our books. We'll just have Mr. Subers give it a second look. But it basically, I think it's a good thing. Kids, if they want to be on the football team now and they're homeschooled, they're allowed to come and play. So that's what that says. And they do so when they're homeschooled, believe it or not, they do so at no extra cost. We can't charge them. In the cyber school area, we're allowed to charge them because that money actually follows the students. So if they're going to come back and be involved in something, we expect a little bit of a reimbursement.
Say that again. Let's say as a football player, we pay for the uniforms?
You could subject them to the activity fee.
Yeah,
That would be
We
it.
pay for their uniforms still.
You technically
Yeah,
would.
because their tax dollars didn't go anywhere. The homeschool kids.
Why didn't they go anywhere?
Because they didn't seek out. When we send a cyber school, when a student comes to the district and then they decide to go to cyber school,
Right.
the money that we would have gotten if they were here doesn't come to us anymore.
Right. It goes to.
So if they come back to us, we can charge them a certain amount because the money that
okay.
we've never received any reimbursement.
Right.
See,
I'm lumping that all into
yeah,
one group.
just again, we're kind of getting into the weeds here, but a homeschooled student has no obligation. We don't even know about them until they come to us with their portfolios. They could technically hide from us. We have no affirmative obligation as a school district to go out into the hills of Geigertown and look for kids who might not be in school. It happens. I mean, I don't know if there is any in our geographic area that are just avoiding the law and not coming to school. But it's incumbent, if we were to find out about it as a school district, we could technically have them fined because the state puts on the onus on the school district for enforcement, believe that or not, of attendance in something for all kids. Because I had a case in Twin Valley when I was there. I got one of those phone calls. There's this kid down here in Honeybrook. He's not going to school. I had to go down. Next thing you know, he wasn't homeschooled. He wasn't doing anything. We told them they had to do something, and we would have had to fine them if they hadn't. We turned them over to the magistrate, and then there are regulations on the books for violation of compulsory attendance, which are not really a school law. They're just state criminal law. You can't violate compulsory attendance. You just don't have to come to public school. You're learning more than you expected tonight here, aren't you?
Okay.
So that I'm satisfied that what we have there is what we need to move forward with those. The last review is extended athletic season competition, and this one I'm sure will generate a bit of conversation. As if you remember last year when we were approached by Odyssey of the Mind and TSA, and just in fairness to them, it's not the first time we've ever been approached as a district. I remember it when I was a principal at Twin Valley, so more things change the more they stay the same. Andrew and I had a private conversation. I said I was getting tired. I've been dealing with this for 2 decades now and not having an answer to this. So I think it's time to try to get a process in place to deal with and anticipate better how we handle these postseason competitions. So what we've done is this used to just be the policy for extended athletic season competition. What we've tried to do is blend the two of them and just call it postseason event competition regardless of athletics. So if you look under the purpose, we took out the wording part of interscholastic athletics and just put the overall activities program, so that by default includes everything. And then in the next paragraph, the first part of it that isn't italicized is what had been there, and I'm okay with that. But what we decided to do was define a little further what postseason competition really meant. And if you see the words there, it means for all other activities that includes academic and music/band competitions that occur beyond the regular competition season. And the reason I left the language that way is that it's hard to define a TSA season. It's hard to define the Odyssey of the Mind season. They kind of just compete all year, and then they get to go to these end of the year competitions that are culminating activities. So it's hard to put into words, but that's the intent of that wording there. The rest of that, authority and delegation, I don't think really. The only thing that I wanted to do is what's on the next page, and there is a typo on it. I added a number 6 because this is where the issue becomes a pressure point. That I think it's incumbent upon the district from the administrative level to provide an annual budget and funding guidelines for all non-athletic activities, because it's pretty well described in athletic activities through the athletic budget. But we don't do a real good, we wind up with the conversations that we had last year and organizations appealing to the board, can you do this, can you do that? I don't think that knee-jerk reaction is the best way to go about making sure these kids have the opportunities that I think are good for them. So what we did to address that, that's all in the policy. Where the major changes occurred is in the administrative guideline. So before, is there any question on the policy part of it?
Yeah, I had a couple of comments. This
It's
is policy
122.
122. I just, maybe it should be postseason event activities instead of competitions, because it seems to me that the non-athletic clubs and things of that nature have come to the board to participate in things. It may or may not be a competition. It's something else that they're doing that is beyond normal scope of whatever.
Point well
the regular
taken.
season
Yeah,
is.
again, this is open for
It
conversation.
could be, any activity can also be a competition, as opposed to a competition may not be necessarily an activity,
Do you want to put /competition/activities?
Whatever you want to do, I'm just saying.
Well, the marching
broad
band's a
scope.
great example.
Yeah,
If
marching
it's
band-
postseason for football, but it's no competition for the marching band.
Right.
They're
A
just
parade, for
supporting it.
example, is not
And
a
they don't
competition.
show up. That's a
Right.
problem.
A parade is a parade. It's not a competition. It's an activity. And so that's the reason why I just thought that would probably be a good idea. The second thing is, I think there needs to be something in here that the board reserves the right to define what a regular season is and what an extended season is, whatever that may be.
That's in the guideline.
Maybe it should be in the policy. I just think it should be there, because in any other policy, the board always reserves the right to weigh in on something. I just think that should be part of the policy itself, because I don't want a coach defining for the school district what his or his season
You can put it
may
wherever you want. It doesn't have any less effect if you keep it in the guideline or in the policy.
You know what I mean?
I mean, we can take this, when you see the statement here, if you want that in the policy rather than,
Yeah, I personally like to see it in the policy. I think it carries more weight. Guidelines can get changed very easily, but policies require board approval.
well, actually, guidelines need to come to you too.
Oh, do they? All
Yep.
right. But
At least while I'm superintendent, they do.
okay, well, look, this is the first time any of this has come to us
Right.
in the 5 years I've been here. So, and we've never approved guidelines. We've only always approved the policies. So,
And just before you walked over, if you heard my little speech about that, I felt that it was time that where the details, and when we get to 829 here tonight, where the actual implementing details comes in the regulation.
no, you've told me that 100 times. and
Okay.
I'm in agreement with you, but we've never voted on a guideline. We've always voted on policies. So I think as a board, I'd like to see it in there that the board always reserves the right to define what the regular season is and the extended season. And quite frankly, we have contracts that point to our policies. And so what we do in our policies has a big impact on our contracts.
Absolutely.
And so I think we need to be very careful with our wording here.
I don't see that really clearly defined in the guideline either, Dr. Otto. Is it number one? Is that what you're referring to? You think that covers it?
Where are you, Frank?
On the guideline, number one of the guideline says the district reserves the right to fund any post-season.
No.
Where is it?
I'm on the very first page.
The-
For the non-athletic.
I'm looking in the guidelines, not the.
Right,
policy.
on the
Where-
very first page, underneath the date and all that.
Yep.
Under the word cheerleading. That's where all of your seasons
That's just
are.
non-athletic though, right?
Well, these are all the athletic seasons. So they're defined. Now, underneath that, I added a bullet that says, for all other non-athletic activities, including academic clubs, the defined season is the entire school year.
No, but specifically, where does it say the board reserves the right to define what the season is of the?
Well, by this policy, you are defining it.
He's saying that the season is the entire school year is what it says. So we've defined it as meaning.
It doesn't have those words in there, but by default, you're approving this. This is what the seasons will be. You've already reserved the right by approving this policy. If you want to use the words "the board reserves the right," you can do that, but it's the same thing.
Got it. Yep.
Yeah, I think we should use those words, and I think they should be listed in the policy.
Well, I didn't know you were still listening, Connor. I agree with you. The only thing I also noticed on here was just some typos at the bottom under number 4. Number 1, it says the regular season for interscholastic athletic activity is identified. I don't know if that should be, any postseason non-extracurricular activity.
That's the way it's been reading for years. We didn't change
I know,
that
but we're
part.
saying,
Right.
this policy is trying to extend this beyond just athletics, right? So I
Yes.
guess it calls out just athletics right there.
Okay.
It doesn't say anything else. So is band an athletic event? Is
Actually, band falls marching
TSA,
band.
you know,
Anything that we determine is an extracurricular event by the contract, we have those, they're listed in there.
yeah, I'm just pointing it out that this just says athletic as opposed to
Okay,
something else.
did you make that note?
3 and 4 seem to be the same thing as 1 and 2.
Oh, yes.
You got the typo in 6.
Yeah, those
And then
those were
this says,
existing.
provide an annual budget and funding guidelines for all non-athletic activities, but, you know, obviously I think it goes without saying, also athletic activities as well. I mean, I think, you know, one of the things where the rubber hits the road for us, at least the last couple of years in terms of our budget, has been you have a team that does very well, and then it wants to go to, and I'm going to speak specifically of athletics here, they want to compete in, you know, what has traditionally been postseason activities, and we have discussed whether or not we were going to fund those things, right? I mean, we've actually had that conversation. I remember Tom Shack coming up and saying, how much do you spend annually on these things? And should we be spending our money on that as opposed to something else? So, I mean, we didn't do it, but certainly the question arose, and I'm just wondering whether it would be possible for the coaches or the athletic director or whoever it is to say, okay, if this team were to go all the way and towards the championship, what would the cost be? And I need to include that as an asterisk or an addendum to my budget to say, so that the board now is aware of it and they're discussing it in the budgets in terms of, okay, how much money are we setting aside so that we know that, you know, could be a likelihood. We could have 5 teams that go to championships this year, or none. But I'd rather know as part of the budget process that this comes up. Usually what happens though is we budget for the regular season, and then we have an extended season, and then, you know, we're just pulling money out of the general fund to pay for these things, and that's when people get upset, you know, because we're spending money on things that we didn't plan for. But as part of the regular budgeting process, you can say, well, look, postseason play is going to cost, I think our number was $20,000 or something like that all in when we did an analysis 2 years ago. But somebody ought to be doing that analysis, I think, on an annual basis. And the clubs, that goes for the club organizers too, the advisors that run these clubs and say, okay, well, TSA, what's the likelihood we're going to go, you know, to some event in Kansas again or wherever it was they went? Is that every year? Is it once a year?
How are you defining postseason? Districts, states, counties?
Well, this
regional, state?
defines it by, in terms of
calendar.
athletics, we're using PIAA as a standard for what's postseason and what's regular season. In terms of the non-athletic events, we've defined it, I guess in terms of our guidelines, there is no such thing as a postseason. Everything's included. Our season is the entire school year.
Actually, that could be amended because in the case of TSA, they went, I think, beyond the school year.
Into the summer.
Dr. Can I see the policy? There was a wording in there that you read that.
Right. So, I mean, I
wasn't
think
sure.
that's the issue is one of these
Yeah,
things
give
where
her a copy of it.
I,
Get
look,
one of those
in
extra
terms of
copies.
line item number 6, we're talking about budget and making sure that the coaches or the advisors or whoever is responsible for that particular activity, be it an athletic event or a non-athletic event, is going to put together a budget for those activities and what's going on during the regular season as well as a postseason play or a participation. Then I think, you know, I would like to see that so that from a finance committee perspective, from a budgetary perspective, we know that, hey, look, we're spending, I think it's $675,000 a year on extracurricular activities, but there could also be another $20,000 on top of that for postseason stuff, lodging, trips, whatever, stipends, you know, all that kind of stuff that kicks in that we ultimately end up paying for.
Well, I know, like for us with TSA, in the beginning of the year, I put in for board approval for all 3 trips.
Mm-hmm.
And although that does give, like for the national one, that gives what it would cost approximately for one person, until the state conference is over, we don't know how many kids would be going.
Mm-hmm.
You know, now last year we took 3.
Would there be a cap? I mean, would you ever have 10 kids that would go?
in all I mean, to put it in all honesty, any kid can go to any TSA competition. I put regulations in place to, they have to place a certain way at regionals to attend the state conference. They have to place a certain way at the state conference to attend the national conference. That's my doing. Could we get 10, 15, 20 kids placing first at states? I guess it's a possibility. You know, competing against 5,000 people across the state of Pennsylvania is probably an unlikely possibility.
I guess where I would go with that would be, okay, well, you know the program better than I do, right? So I would say that your responsibility would be, okay, what's the likelihood that we're going to get to these levels? And then B, based on past experience, and then B, how many of the kids would actually get to those levels? And then you put a budget accordingly. So, you know, here's the likely budget, and here's, you know, best circumstances. You know, we were very successful, and it's going to cost us this. And that way, no one's surprised when it comes to the money's there. Right? We put it aside as part of our budgetary process, and it's not one of these things that comes up and say, okay, well, now everybody's got to dig into the pockets, we got to go fundraising, we got to go here, there, and everywhere. And there's all this emotional distress in the community, and particularly amongst the kids, about whether or not this is a feasibility. And again, that's where I'm going with it. Is I'd like to be able to, we can do is whatever we want to do as long as we plan for it.
Well, I need to throw a word of caution on here, because this comes from years of experience, and Bill can flank me on this as a high school principal. There are times when someone will let us know, well, you know, we may need to take 4 kids to L.A. for this competition. And I'm going to say, well, where are you getting the money? How are you flying those kids out there? How are they going to eat? How are you going to pay for the room? And suddenly I'm presenting the board with a $25,000 bill that we didn't anticipate.
Right.
That can't happen anymore.
No.
That's why this policy is being discussed.
I'm in agreement with you 100%. I guess that's why I'm sort of bringing this up, because if somebody comes to us and as a board, we sit there and say, well, wait a minute, you're flying 50 students to L.A. for a competition?
Well, that's probably not going to happen.
You know what I mean? Well, I'm just saying,
even if it's 2.
You know, you have a band that does exceptionally well, and they want to go to some, I don't know, national competition in L.A. Is that something we want to support, or is it not? But that's a big line item you're throwing in a board mid-season.
Absolutely.
Saying, okay, look, this is what we want to do.
Right.
I'd rather know sometime in October or whenever these budgets are, you know, the prior year, hey, look, you know, there's a possibility we got to, you know, this is what we're planning for next season. And we as a board,
ironically,
that's ridiculous.
Right.
Take it off the table. I don't want you getting the kids' hopes up that they're going to East Jabip to play whatever, because they're just not going to happen.
Could that be part of the field trip request form? Right now, the field trip request form specifies who is going, where they are going, how many days it's going to be, what the cost is going to be, where the cost is coming from. So is there something that could go along with that would give an overview for the year, or have a certain date? You know, by October 30th, the board needs any possible competitions or any possible activities that will come from these.
That's built into what I plan to share with the board.
Oh, okay.
The one thing that I think has to happen is, because I think it's fair to the community has to know August 28th, the day you walk into school, what you can expect from the board, regardless of how far you go or if you go nowhere, so that you're not out there in bringing legions of people to the board to you know, put pressure on them. And I don't mean this in a negative way, but that's what happens. You come to the board, put pressure on them to do this because the kids have done so well, but yet at the same time, the board has to, again, weigh out its financial responsibilities based on, because how do you say no to 4 kids that are going to shine at OM, but you don't have the money to do it? It just makes everybody look bad, and it doesn't paint the community in a good image. So what I'm trying to find here is a ground of compromise where the board can at least give some financial support based on the budget, and can give some hope to others that may want to fundraise and know that, for example, I thought we came up with a good plan on the fly last year to say we'll pay your registrations for both of these groups. We'll fund partially the lodging and the food. But I saw airline tickets in my eyes, and when you get airline tickets 3 weeks before you have to go, some of them could cost $1,500 a pop. And I just didn't feel that was fair to the board to suddenly turn around and hand them a $10,000 bill. Oh, by the way, you got to fly these kids to Omaha. That's just not fair to the board.
Yeah, I think from a finance perspective, we put our finance committee hats on, which I think all three of us are on as well. We're looking for the worst scenario, and that's the best for you. You know, the best thing that could happen to the kids. We're looking for the worst. Now, what's the most expensive that it could be? And it's up to us to segregate that money and say, well, this isn't all the actual cost. So when we're sitting there trying to balance the budget in November, December, January, February, we're not saying, well, this costs this much, let's not do it. We need to, as part of the finance committee, say, no, it costs this much. It could potentially cost this much. But at least we know what those numbers are, and we can sort of work through how to make that happen.
I mean, literally, if you've been to our meetings the last 2 or 3 years, we're looking at $1,000 line items in our budget saying, keep it, don't keep it. And it's a difficult position to be in when you're looking at a $50 million budget, that you get to go to that level of detail and say yes or no. The parent teachers organization has stepped up and given $2,000. You've seen how far that money goes, right? The money you guys have raised and brought forward. It covers a lot of stuff that we just can't pay for anymore. So as a board member, I don't want to be in a position where, it's like, you got 15 kids in the audience looking at you and they're saying, oh, please, we've done so well. And you got to say, sorry, thanks for shopping. It's a terrible position to be in. I'd like to know up front in April and May of the prior year, when we're doing our budget, you know what, we look at the last 5 years, this has been our success rate in terms of all these extracurricular activities, and these are the expenses that are associated with it. What's a realistic assumption as to what that expense is going to be this year? Is it $20,000? Is it $5,000? And we have to look at the individual teachers and coaches who know those programs better than we do to say, yeah, it's realistic that we're going to go here in this next 12 months. And so you need to set aside some money for this.
And we can escrow.
Well, we talked about that at the last meeting.
You just refill when it's used.
We talked about that, but at some point in time we have to fund it.
Yes.
And two, you have to plan for it too. So you can sit there and say we're going to fund it once, and you got to pick a number, $100,000 in there. And if you're spending $20,000 a year, okay, that's going to last you 5 years. At some point, as a board, we're going to say, okay, are we funding $20,000 a year into this? Or are we going to fund $50,000 every 2 years? Or but you still have to plan.
As you
you still have to plan though.
Yeah, what I really would like to see, and maybe we're doing it, is that when a coach comes and presents himself as the coach or the team leader or the club leader, are they giving us a budget? Like we're going to vote on winter sport coaches. Have they actually given us an outline of what their budget is and what they're planning on spending and what their season's going to be according to them at that time, so that we know up front what's going to happen this winter?
Well, the budget's already been decided. We decided
the prior coach.
But I mean, I'm saying as it progresses, do the coaches actually present what they're going to be spending?
They hand all of their budget requests into the athletic facilitator.
All of them?
All of them.
And then what about the clubs and?
The clubs are run through the building principals.
So do they present a budget form showing you what they're anticipating?
Well, for the clubs, you guys have a student
We
activity
did, I can
account.
say, I didn't support any club, like, I'll give you an example of Future Business Leaders of America. They would go to competitions out in Pittsburgh, Seven Springs Resort, and some years she would budget $8,000. And, well, I have to honestly say, about 6 years ago, I said, we can't afford to do this, so you're going to have to take this out of your budget. And we hassled a little bit for a while, and she got the number down. She talked to the Boyertown high school and shared a bus, and kids shared rooms if they made it. But she did project a big number, which we didn't end up using. And then she found ways to cut costs. But in the end, I kept saying, I have to cut my budget, and I can't see how we can afford to pay for one kid $300 a day for lodging and food and everything. That's not fair to, like, athletes don't generally go out and stay overnight. They ride a bus back and forth to the event.
Let me ask that we get our last final comments on this issue. It's getting more into a finance committee issue that we can discuss, and we should discuss in a lot of detail, but let's just kind of wrap up this.
Okay.
Well, let me give you what my initial recommendation was, to try to deal with at least some of the postseason competitions, and if we're not ready to move it forward, we're not in any hurry, but I've been in education, at least in administration, 20 plus years dealing with this issue with TSA when I was back at Twin Valley. They had a very strong chapter, and they would come to me every year, and they would never come with money, but they would come with great plans. And that just disturbed me, because then I'm the one looking like the mean guy and the one that says, no, you can't do this. I didn't think that was fair to me or the school district. So I'm trying, again, get back to finding a balance as to what the district can commit to, and then everyone goes in with open eyes, knowing that this is what the district chooses to do. If you don't want to do this, this is fine by me. I just think if we don't put something in place, every year we're going to be scurrying in April and May deciding how we're going to pay for this stuff.
Well, I think Andrew's recommendation, coaches and advisors put together a budget. Okay.
Yeah, I like the idea of bullet point number 6, where you say, hey, look, provide an annual budget and funding guidelines. All I'm saying is, let's have it for both, not just non-athletic.
Understood. Now, but what I wanted to say is what I put in place was this. This is a new attachment. This has just been added by me today, or
on the guidelines.
On the guidelines.
1 through 5.
1 through 5 on the last page. This is my attempt to try to put a fence around what we will do and what we won't do. So the first thing,
This then should go into the policy.
you can put it in the guideline or you can put it in the policy. I just want to make it clear to you, don't be afraid of having something in a guideline and thinking it doesn't have the power of the board. It does. You vote it, you approve it. It doesn't have to be in policy. It doesn't give it any more strength. Okay. Seriously, it doesn't.
I'm just thinking from a teacher or administrator, what holds more weight? I mean, you say
anything that you put in place that is written has to be followed because you approved it as a board. Whether it's called guideline or policy is immaterial. The reason I put it in guidelines is if you take all of this and put it into the guideline, you wind up with a 10-page policy. I don't personally think that's the policy is supposed to be from 10,000 feet. This gets into the weeds more. This tells you what
this
you
up
want.
for first reading. Are they going to see the guidelines?
Yes, that will get attacked. Yes, absolutely. Both of them will come forward.
Okay. The only other comment I had on the guideline, and maybe it's a point of clarification. On the first page, you get through the 6 bullet points. The 6th bullet point speaks to non-athletic activities, including clubs.
Right.
You said the defined season is the entire school year. Maybe that should be the entire calendar year. I don't know, since we seem to have some stuff that runs into the summer. Any academic...
It's the entire year. You can take out school year. Scratch the word school.
Go back to whatever the board chooses and you're done.
Then beyond that, it says any academic competition... the school year could be defined as July 1st through June 30th. To be quite frank with you, just because the kids aren't in school doesn't mean it's not a school year.
Budget.
Then it says, then in a separate paragraph, we pull out marching band. And so I don't know whether that marching band needs to be lumped in with that bullet point or pulled out separately.
No, that was the attempt to deal with the issue that came up last year regarding because the marching band is the one unique organization that there's a community expectation that they are involved in football games.
Correct.
And that's why that was put in here.
And I see that. I guess what I saw, but it says any performances beyond the regular football season shall be treated the same as athletic season, postseason, for the purpose of per diem stipends.
I'm going to let Mr. McElmoyle explain that one to you.
Well, before you go there, just remember that parades, we have this issue of the Memorial Day parade, which is in May. It's not during the football season. There's a Halloween parade that should be part of, that too. And quite frankly, any other event that comes up, maybe there's a Christmas thing. I remember sitting down here at Birdsboro for, the elections, and there's, whatever the Birdsboro does for Christmas, and there was sort of this expectation that some portion of the band was going to be down there playing one of those nights, and they were told no. And, I just kind of looked at it and said, all right, well, I'll take that back to the board, to the district, and discuss it with them. But this gets to that issue of, you have all these other things that band does, right? And to say that it just ends when the football season ends after 8 games, I think is probably something that needs to be addressed. It needs to be the whole calendar year.
Yeah, well, the big change, the big change though on that, the big change was when it became extracurricular. Prior to last year, the band was part of a 4-credit class.
Right.
And band meant first period, and so because of that, those other things you're bringing up, the parade, the Christmas performance, were part of a 4-credit class, really. And once it became extracurricular,
it was an academic expectation.
It's not anymore. Now, the band director was both. He was earning credit, or rather,
A stipend.
Stipend.
yeah, getting his stipend, and the first period was one and the same. Once it became marching band became separate as extracurricular, then the board has to redefine that season. Now, maybe they can list those items.
Well, I guess what I'm just saying is, we had this discussion at the board level, and I think I came down on the side of the fence is that if band is now more of a club activity, right? Clubs don't just dissipate, after 6 weeks. I mean, typically they don't. I mean,
That's correct.
You can sit there and say, look, band is all year, and it's available for all year. We're going to have certain events that are, we got 8 regular events between September 1st and November, whatever, 15th. And then after that, we got 4 more events that we're going to do. Now, it could be a band competition. It could be a parade. It could be whatever. But, there could be other events that happen between January 1st and May 30th or June 4th or whatever it is. And those things could be, okay, well, look, you're going to do some sort of thing at Christmas. You're going to do, maybe it's a band competition in February somewhere. I don't know. And then you're going to do a parade in May. So you can't just hang up your musical instrument and call it quits. And the band director, whoever that is, who's now a club person who's getting a stipend, that stipend covers all these events. They can't say, well, I'm done, or pay me more, or whatever it is, because,
Is there a pep band? I haven't been to like a high school basketball game. Do we have a band?
No, there's not.
There hasn't been a pep band here.
Because way back when I was in school, you had the marching band, and then you turned into the pep band for the winter and the spring.
The key words in your statement were way back when.
Way back when I knew, yeah.
I'm just kind of laughing with you because I remember pep bands
That's
too.
just band,
And again, the
marching
kids-
band, jazz. That's it, right?
The kids
Band,
were
marching band, jazz band.
getting credit. So they had, you had to be in the pep band. That's part of to earn the credit, you had to do that. Now they're paying an activity fee, and those kids are going to have to, they have to know ahead of time, you're in marching band, you're going to be expected to perform
Beyond
for any
football
activities
season.
that come up throughout the entire school year.
Take more from the marching band into the pep band into the events band. So that once football season is over and you're not marching, you are now the school pep band.
I guess I just look at band as,
So that
don't
gives
they
it-
want to be there? Don't they want to play? Don't they want to showcase what they've learned? And
Up to a certain point.
I know some of them were there for the credit, and those people aren't there anymore. But you have these other people there, and now they're volunteering to be there. They don't get a letter for it. They don't get,
A grade.
A grade. They're not getting.
Well,
they're there because they want to play.
If I can give you another example, let's say a football team was asked, well, we may come up with a football event in February for you and March. So you have to be prepared. We're going to bring you out for a week of practice. You have to be prepared to play a football game at the end of March.
Okay.
And we may do one in June too.
Well,
I think that's the
different
same
because we tied
idea.
ourselves to the PIAA thing. And quite frankly, in my druthers, I wouldn't have ever tied us to that and had some other organization defining for us what a season is or isn't. I think power should always rest with the board. Put that aside.
Don't mess with the PIAA.
Put that aside. We've tied ourselves for athletic events to that, right? But there's nothing saying that, hey, look, if you're going to be part of the football team, say, you got to be weight training, and through the winter and into the spring and so on and so forth. And we expect you here for early practice in August and, all these other things. I mean, there's an unwritten sort of understanding that that's what happens.
It's against PIAA
There's
rules
open
to do
gyms,
it.
and there's
You have to call them open
expectation
gyms.
depending on the coach that you're there.
Right.
To X amount of open gyms.
Right.
But I'm just saying, for any athlete, any band participant, if the season never ends, a lot of your marginal players, whether they're playing an instrument or they're on any team, and they're not getting a lot of playing time, when it becomes a year-round thing, their desire to be a part of that team is diminished. They start to self-select, and they say, I'm not going out for that team.
One of the realities is when it's an extracurricular at the end of football season, if 20 kids want to quit the band, they're done.
That's a reality that we can't control. You can't force them as an extracurricular organization.
So you march with what you have.
No, understood. I want to make it, I'm sure there's probably some attrition without doing the statistics.
I'd like to jump in at some point. I've been meaning to jump
Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
You don't have to ask.
All right, I don't want to interrupt anybody. I agree a whole lot with what Mr. Basil is saying, that we shouldn't be ceding control of our authority to begin and end our seasons when we want. In regard to the marching band, why isn't the season the entire school year? I can't figure out why that's the case. Why is it only tied to the football season?
Because that, I think, Connor, based on what I know about the band, the majority of their activity, if you will, starts with band camp in July. They, like every band across the state, they go to their school's football games, and then our band is involved in this East Coast, whatever it is, competition. And then after that, the activity, quite frankly, is a parade here and there. So I don't know.
True, but that parade is included in the activity, and I think for that sake alone, the season is the entire year.
But my point is,
Okay, go ahead.
the impetus and the, for lack of a better term, the authority to make them stay has diminished once those seasons end. If someone chooses by their own desire to no longer participate, there's not much the school can do about that. So that's to Andrew's point when he said, well, if you only have 20 left, then that's what you go with.
Okay, I'm also looking at it from a financial point of view. The postseason stipends for athletic coaches and other advisors, those are for events that are not necessarily, they're anticipated, but it's not guaranteed they're going to go to those.
That's correct.
With the marching band, we expect them to be in the parade. We expect them to be in the Memorial Day parade. That is expected when they sign up, and for that reason, I also think it should be part of the.
I agree. I agree with that. I think what you do is you put in this wording saying that we have the right to define what the season is, like you do. But I think we specifically point out those things that we know about right now. Mr. McElmoyle said of what our expectation is of them to be there. At least that solves 80% of the problem.
Yeah, I agree.
And say, look, we expect you to be.
I think that's fair.
We expect you to be at the Memorial
Day.
It's
due process. You're being served notice. That's just basic. That's just basic due process. You can't. I never like to blindside people, so you can't say, "Oh, well, what do you mean now? I have to go to the Halloween parade?" No, you were told.
Yeah.
So as long as we put that in writing and tell them that, I think that's fair.
Yeah, I think one other thing, I didn't realize band members were getting letter jackets and stuff. That's the case. You don't get your letter jacket until
he's got a jacket. I don't know if he's got a
whatever the letter is.
Honestly,
he's got a jacket.
I'm not in the inner circle of the band to know enough.
I don't know whatever the reward system is for participating, but you get it when you complete the season. Just like any varsity athlete, you pick the team, you get it at the end of the season. You don't get it, day one. You get it.
I am a little closer to it, and I think we're making something out of less because I think most of those kids are interested in going. We just have to define. Our expectation is that you're at some of these community events that are important to the district.
So the recommendation is that you want us to include that wording in here.
Yeah, my suggestion would be to. Define specifically. The wording that's in here is fine. That you have in here, but define also specifically for the marching band some of the events that is expected for them to attend. And
I agree with Mr. Shermanero. We should label the events that are expected. However, I also think that we should just say that the season is the entire school year.
Right.
I agree.
Because now we're coming out and saying that we're going to be paying somebody more.
Well, no, we can strike that. That was our initial. That's why this is a draft.
Yeah, no, I get it.
Well, and the wording in the one policy that I looked at that Dr. Otto had under Section 2, the last part that's in red, it says the music and band competitions that occur beyond the regular competition season. Couldn't you just do that occur beyond the regular school year?
I'm not sure what you're looking at.
We don't see color.
Under number 2, what would be in italics?
No, the reason we did that is that the band has this distinct. They have their own season.
Right.
Where they go to this East Coast competitions. There's a defined season by that organization.
Yes.
Not that we have to let that organization dictate what's done, but that's currently what Daniel Boone uses as kind of their guideline for that.
But it wasn't always that way. From my understanding, it wasn't.
I'd have to return to my historian
because
again.
It was part of the course for credit.
Right.
But
Remember,
traditionally,
we really got a large segment of the population really upset when they weren't at certain parades.
That's the reality.
And they'd always been there.
Right.
So,
And we want to avoid that kind of bad blood thing. I mean, that's part of bringing this forward as well, to create a more positive atmosphere around all of these activities.
The only reason I'm bringing this up is because it is worded shall include academic and musical band competitions. Well, with the academic clubs...
Well, that's referring to the thing you do, and
right,
what
but
OM does. And
but then you have to define then what's a regular competition season. If you include the school year...
I think we kind of took care of that over
is
here.
Is that
by
over
saying
in there?
The entire year. So we can make that consistent with this.
Okay, then that needs to be worded so that they're...
Well, I'll look you up
Same.
tomorrow, and you can come over and help me with the wording.
Get me a sub. I'll come over.
I'll find it.
If you're going to tie the academic clubs in with the statements about band, it has to be a statement that covers both of them, not just a band year.
Trust me when I say writing these policies to try to cover every contingency gives me a headache.
Oh, I'm sure it does.
So,
I'll try to give this some thought, and
right.
and
Well,
I'll
that's what,
send in
as a
my
committee,
thoughts
that's what we
too,
should do. So any input that anybody has, we'll certainly consider. This is what
All
the
right,
first
let's,
reading is for.
Let's try to get that wrapped up.
Well, but I do want to go to that last page. I didn't really get to what it is. This is, to me, the most important part I want to discuss. This is these funding guidelines that's referred to in the policy. And I'll just read them. First, the district reserves the right to fund any postseason academic competition based on available funds. And I think the district needs to reserve that right. I mean, if there's no money, then that's what you need to tell people. Sorry, this isn't going to happen. Number two, the district will develop a budget for all postseason academic competitions based on available funds. That probably should read, the administration will direct all activities to develop a potential budget. Number three, all clubs and activities must annually report to their respective building principal the anticipated costs, that's where I said it here, of any potential postseason competitions / activities. Again, this is just first pass, as part of the annual budget development process. So when we go to vote on that budget in June for the next year, we should already have kind of an inkling of what we might need next year. At least it's a number. It may be even wrong, but at least there's something in place. It's a placeholder. And then finally, the district will fund or partially fund based on available funds the following. And these are the things, and I was basing this on the experience that we had this year. We covered registration fees, we covered lodging, and the way we covered it was lodging will include the day before, the day or days of, and 1 day after completion, capped at $75 a day. Meals, the same day as the lodging, except they would be capped at $30 a day, and that would obviously be per participant. And then transportation would be the sole responsibility of the participants through fundraising or whatever, so we're not paying for $1,500 airline tickets.
So whatever would be above those numbers that are listed in there would be
You're
the
on your own.
responsibility of the student.
Right, you're on your own. Either parents pay for it, or you fundraise, or you do whatever. It
Now,
would not be the district's responsibility.
I-
How it would happen, I would rather define and say not how it happens. We're saying what will happen from the district standpoint, with the implication that you have to find the other money elsewhere.
And again, you got to define postseason.
Well, that part of it we
It's
can.
easy for,
Right.
for sports,
Like
but
states, is that considered postseason?
Well, see, and there again, that's what that wording is. If you consider it beyond the academic school year, then our state competition, NOM state competition, is during the school year. The worlds that OM goes to and our national competition is outside of the school year. It's the month after the school year ends.
And we didn't, I think we did pick up the tab for the states this year.
Not for us, you didn't.
No, because
For TSA,
I was told by
everything
her
is
mother it was
funded.
$400 that she's paid for her
Yes.
son.
Yeah,
because
maybe,
state's
well
not
then, and then we have it. And I don't, again, that becomes a question when you listen to those costs. I think the board needs a budget to deliberate on that and to say, well, we'll partially fund it, or we'll put X aside for it, or direct me to do it, or I'll make a recommendation to say no, yes or no.
Look, if the funds are available, maybe we fund all of it.
If that's my point. In a good year, you might be able to not have to do any fundraising.
Well, and we do try to do fundraising. Like for our regional conference, the club pays for the kids. We put out about $2,500 to get the kids to our regional conference. That's what our regional conference costs us with the number of people we take. And then the state conference is $400 per kid. That doesn't include the bus that costs us $4,000 to get there and back. The club pays for that.
That's why transportation was not included.
Right, but
Generally,
those two things that I just stated are all club funded and parent funded. And that doesn't include the registration fee to get nationally joined to TSA. It doesn't include the uniform that goes in there. Like, there's a lot of for a kid to be in TSA and do all the competitions, you're looking at about $600 a year, not including nationals.
And I would say, and not to denigrate any club, I don't think it's the district's responsibility to pay the things you just mentioned.
No, and I'm not saying it is. I just wanted, because the way you mentioned
I know that there's massive costs here to be involved in these clubs. I mean, it's
right, but you had mentioned that you guys paid for states, and I just wanted to make it clear.
Then that was a mistake.
Yeah.
That was a mistake, and that was just misspoken. That was just an assumption on my part.
Well, I don't know if it's that way with OM. That's where I didn't know if the.
No, actually
No, PTC gives OM money.
Maybe I got to hit up PTC.
You can't.
See, this is
middle school stuff.
really how this. To be honest with you, we didn't. The request didn't come from us, do you need money? It was you came to us and asked for the money. So we wouldn't have I think that's why we didn't even know that you might have needed money for states. We weren't asked. I don't recall that ever coming across my desk.
It was
It started with the nationals is when the request came.
Right, and that was because states was never even.
So maybe we need to work on language that says we won't fund the state level competitions. And if it gets to the nationals.
This is a good first pass. I mean,
Well, and again, trust me,
we need to take
it's a first reading. It's not even on the board agenda yet for a first reading.
It should be a first reading until we take another pass at it here, to be honest with you.
Because I think you have to be careful, because if you have an athletic team that's going to states because they won regionals or districts or counties, but you're not going to pay for TSA states, because it's all about how each organization labels each level. What's the equivalent level?
You're never going to find your policy will never.
You're never. But
your policy is not going to.
You can get to.
And that's what this is attempting to do.
Now, can I make a request for what you have in there for the national? How you broke down what the district would pay for? I know at times I have put out of pocket to go to the state competition for TSA, and I personally don't feel like I should have to put out of pocket for that. But is there any way to put something in there that if a coach is going or an advisor is going, that
it all
the
answer to that is if the district grants you permission, then the district has to decide what its responsibility is, because you're not operating as an independent operator. You're doing that with the permission of the school district. So I think you need to solicit the district's permission.
As an agent of the school district, too, to be quite frank. And I think the district might have some sort of responsibility there, but I don't know.
Well, none of that. I'll just make it very clear. None of these clubs operates outside of the umbrella of the Daniel Boone Area School District.
Right.
Period. That's an important point.
How much of this money comes out of the student activity fund for these?
Well, the student activity fund, boards by law aren't allowed to really put their hand in that. That's a separate enterprise account.
In these activities,
so let me say this: if
TSA
TSA did Dancing with the Stars up here on the stage, and they filled this auditorium and they gained $30,000, you would never hear from them. They would take that money and they would go off and do their thing.
Well, that's my point. Is that the students are doing things to raise funds, and they refund the student activity fund, but they're also spending money out. Are any of these postseason things that we're talking about that the clubs participated, taking some of those student activity funds to help pay for that stuff? It's not all coming from the board.
I would ask you do, don't you?
They've raised the money, then they would spend the money.
Yes, we take the money in our account. That is
I would imagine it helped defray some of this cost.
Oh, yeah, it does, because otherwise...
We pay the $4,000 in transportation.
Right, that's what we cover the transportation for states to try to bring the costs down out of the student activities fund. Because the way it's broken down, it's one large fund, and then in each school we have like a TSA portion, and we have a whatever.
That's always been the philosophy of fundraising, which is what I think Mrs. Hamill was bringing up earlier. That if you do fundraising, we allow fundraising. We have a fundraising policy. We talked about this at the board the other night. So if you have, the ability to raise your own money, like your own little foundation, and you have a group of parents and you want to sell hoagies 50 weeks out of the year, and the 52nd week you take all your money and you go buy your stuff, you're allowed to do that. We don't really, all we do is funnel the money.
The question came up at that board meeting was, does that money go into the student activities fee account and then come back out again, or does it just stay out?
No, it's supposed to go in and then come back out.
Okay, well, that's the way it should be.
We have a ledger sheet. I mean, we keep an expense account for these clubs. Now, if they're operating as an independent operator as the sports boosters and the music boosters, and they're a 501c3, just like we're doing with our foundation, they keep their own books. We don't have any say or any sway over that money. That's their thing. Just like as we're founding our Ed Foundation, once they start to raise money, we hope they'll give us money, but they don't have to give us a dime. But that's the reason they exist. And if they're going to raise money, they're probably going to give grants and help fund things. But we would have no legal obligation to tell them, well, you got to give us $10,000 to put a new, van out there to take kids back and forth to schools or whatever the cost might be. But with these student activities accounts, they're under the direction of the school. So when TSA spends money, they've got to produce receipts. That's subject to our oversight. We can look at it. We can't tell them how to spend it, but we can watch how it's being spent.
So
in other words, it's student money. That's the kids' money.
They fundraise,
right.
And then we deposit it in the student activities account. And then if there are things like when we pay for the buses, or if we buy competition supplies, which most years we do, that then gets written up as a purchase order. Okay. And it's detailed on the purchase order what we are buying. And then each one has to be signed by the advisor, a student member, and then the building principal.
One of the
attached
I'm sorry.
information.
One of the things we used to do when I was principal at Twin Valley was every graduating class, the class of 04, 05, 06, they raise money. And then they graduate, but there's still $2,000 left in their account. I really can't touch that. It just sits there. So what we tried to do as each graduating class would leave is we'd ask, do you want to make a donation? We would always have one account that would be just a general student activities account, like would be like and not illegally, but like a slush fund, one that you could use for anything. A general student activities account that once a club would disband, they could transfer their money into that account. So many times you'll see around schools, you'll see a new marquee or a new poster, and it says donated by the class of 2005. That's probably with what was left in their account after they held their prom, after they held their class trip, whatever it was. If they don't spend all their money, something has to happen with it. So there isn't just this loosey-goosey attitude toward what happens with the student activity money. It's pretty well regulated, and there are one of the things I can't do, or any building principal can do, is go in and grab that money and say, I'm going to put a new water fountain in the hallway. That has to come out of general operating budget. That money is the kids' money. They raised it, and they have a right to do with it. And we used to have to get the student council president's signature to say donate this to us. So it's a good vehicle for kids to try to do things like what all of these clubs are suggesting.
Okay, let's stay focused on the policies here. It's getting late. We've got 3 policies to review here. And is there any last discussions related specifically to the wording of the policy? Dr. Otto, you're going to take it back and do some...
Well, let me ask you this, before we leave this, because we're at the end of the review. Are we okay with taking 118, 119, 120, and 121 to a first reading? I don't think we are for 122 yet. The very first 4, A, B, C, and D.
Yeah.
With the edits that we talked about, bringing them forward for a first reading.
Yeah, I mean, if you guys can come up with some sort of board review language for 120.
Yep.
And 119, we had some discussion about uniformity.
Yeah, I have notes in there. I'll reflect those, and if they're not proper at the first reading, but I think if we... Go ahead, Connor.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I need to get going.
Okay.
All right, thank you, everybody, for the meeting.
All right, Connor.
Bye, Connor.
I'll talk to you tomorrow, Connor. Give me a call.
Yeah, sounds good. Bye.
All right, bye.
So you said 118, 119, 120, 121.
For a first reading.
121.1.
First reading.
And then 122, post-season event competition.
I think that one we got.
That one needs further development,
That one's coming back again.
further refinement. I would also recommend to move forward our conversation. B and C are brand new. The concussion management and sudden cardiac arrest.
I had my notes in the wrong spot. Yeah.
They reflect the language in the new regulations. So I think if we put them in front of Subers and he thinks they're okay, that's pretty much stock language as to what we're supposed to do with both of those issues.
Okay. So just for again,
So
folks
if I
out
can
there,
bring those forward
concussion
as
management and sudden cardiac arrest are the two policies that we think are pretty standardized, unless anyone has.
there was a law passed this summer. It was called the Safety in Youth Sports Act, and that's both of these policies are right, Bill?
Yeah.
Are reflective of that law that was passed. And
Were you guys looking for some input on page 2 of 132?
whatever input you might have, we'll take.
Well, you said the school, you have your may or shall. I'm just wondering if you...
Yeah, I think you have to decide on that one. May means may,
No,
shall means it will happen.
I guess what I'm wondering is, I forget which parent brought it up, maybe it was you at the meeting, at our committee of the whole meeting when we were talking about it, where they said, there are tests out there you can do prior to a student participating in an athletic event. And I don't know whether we want to incorporate that in a guideline to this policy or not, but I thought that was a great idea to say, okay, well, look, here's the condition of the student's brain prior to this activity. So you have a benchmark to measure against.
And it doesn't cost anything because you own it.
What doesn't
The
cost
machine.
anything?
It's a computer program that they have here.
Oh, I see. Whether it's that program or some
But
other...
it's a concussion test that they
Yeah,
take.
concussion test that you can, somebody can take. So we have how do you, I mean, I get it when you have an obvious concussion, but there are a lot of really mild concussions that people incur that impact the brain.
I would just be careful of, because I'm not a medical professional, of certifying here at the district that we did this little test on them with a machine that says they're free of any symptoms of concussion.
No. You're doing a
Isn't that-
baseline
am I
test
missing the point?
prior-
They take
Am I
the
missing the point?
Yeah, they take
You can
the-
say yes.
Prior
Yes,
to.
they take the test, and then if there's ever a question about a concussion, they go back and they take the test again, and what it does is it pinpoints, you've made a drastic change on your answers. So there's some, it's a baseline test.
It's
but you can
proactive,
take it-
yes.
Who administers the
If I'm
test?
a football player,
Bob
and
does.
in August, I would sit down and take the test one day when I'm up there for practice. I don't know how long it takes, 10 minutes. You sit there
yeah.
and you take the test in August, right? And then in October, you get a severe hit, and now you're down. People wonder, does the guy have a concussion, not have a concussion? 4 days later, he wants to play again. You say, wait a minute, we're going to sit you down, and you're going to take this test again, and we're going to use it as a not the diagnostic tool, but a diagnostic tool to say, wait a minute, we still have some questions about whether or
It
not
could
you're
be
capable
you know
of
what,
playing.
I don't like the results compared to your baseline, you're gonna need to go get cleared by a doctor.
Right. I just think it was a good suggestion, and maybe something we incorporate somehow as part of our guideline. Maybe it's not the policy, but the guideline says we're going to, it says.
I don't think we need a guideline for this. I think we could probably put it right in here.
How would that actually work? I'm a little sorry to be a little...
In terms of the test?
Yeah, no, the process. So we've got this baseline test that was taken. I go and sustain a massive head hit. And, of course, I got to get checked out by my doctor, and the doctor says I'm okay. We're still going to oversee that and say, well, we still want to test you even though your doctor says
No,
it's
if
okay?
there's a question, it
What's the
allows,
process?
it allows a trainer. Like, the entire middle school field hockey team is told, you can come up here and take concussion test on a Saturday morning. Whoever wanted to come came and did it. So now those results are there. So if something were to happen and there's a question like, you know what, you're acting really funny, you're saying you've got a headache, you can come back now and take the test again, and it will just tell you if there's a difference in your result, which then would allow the coach, the trainer, whoever to say, you know what, I have enough questions that I think you need to go see a physician.
Why wouldn't we make that?
Liability
Well, here, no,
if
That's
the
my
results are the
question.
same, but they end up really having an issue, and we don't tell them to go.
I
to the
think we're
doctor?
getting into medical territory there. I'd like Subers to look at this to
What
weigh in
about
on it.
Subers?
I mean, it's a good idea. It's a great idea. I'm just concerned about the liability issue of it.
What I wanted to say, Laurel, to what you said is why wouldn't we have that as part of the physical screening? Every kid has to get a physical before they play. Why don't we just incorporate that into the physical? The report has to come with evidence of a concussion test.
Look, I think that
We screen every child. You cannot come to practice without evidence of having had a physical. Why don't we just put a new checkbox in there that says concussion test?
And on that, taking it to the next level, could we also have a little checkbox that every coach has gone through first aid and CPR training? As an aide, I have to go through CPR and first aid training that the district provides me.
As a teacher, we don't.
I'd have to check the
But a coach is
statute
out
on
on
that.
the field with students that get hurt. And if they don't have basic first aid training,
Isn't
who's
there
liable then?
There's not a medical person at the games?
Well, I appreciate that comment. That's beyond the concussion management issue.
Okay. Well, I don't know what the cardiac arrest.
Well, it's the same. It comes under that School Safety Act that they just passed. We never had to do this before either, but now they're saying.
Because of course my first thought on that was the AEDs.
I think it's a good idea. I think every faculty member should have some sort of first aid and CPR training, just because as a good Samaritan, it never hurts to know what to do if something happens. But whether we make that compulsory or not, I don't know. I think I'd rather run that by legal first.
Yeah.
So, and the change, getting back to this policy wording, is there a change to this paragraph here about superintendent or designee? Is that the comment you had, Andrew?
It was the one right after it says the school may or shall hold an informational meeting prior to the start of each athletic season for all.
Because it speaks to what she's talking about. If you read there, it says how preseason baseline assessments. I think that's what you're talking about.
Yes.
A preseason baseline assessment.
Can aid in the evaluation.
Then I would say.
I think it's shall, in my opinion. I mean, a coach should sit down with their team and
Well,
say,
let me just, if you want to, we'll scratch the word. We have to make that decision there anyway. You can't leave both of those in
that
there.
puts the onus on us that our coaches or our athletic director is supposed to be doing these things. That's my personal opinion. Obviously, other committee members may disagree. So,
Well, if the committee's comfortable, we'll put in shall. Shall means it's an obligation, not an option.
Okay. Anything on 133 regarding cardiac arrest policy?
Again, that's the stock language that has been given to us through the state.
again, I would just check shall. You're going to have the same
Yep.
conversation at the same time.
And these obviously, as all of them go to Subers for review, and we'll also take a review with our contacts at PDE to see what their intent is with some of this. Mr. Subers, he's our solicitor.
And then we had 829 on the list, staff-student communication. We don't really need to talk about that tonight, right? Mr. Muffin,
Frankly, I don't.
No, we don't.
I don't know how much more. Again, we've put together what we believe are. There's a typo in here, but let me just read since the staff communication, the guidelines. These guidelines are intended to reflect the requirements of Board Policy 829. The district expressly prohibits any communication via various electronic means that is done via privately owned electronic communication devices, including but not limited to cell phones, computers, and various forms of social media contact via the internet. Staff may communicate directly with students via any district-owned electronic communication devices if there is a legitimate educational/organizational rationale for this communication. Examples of such communication may be for classroom assignments and projects, necessary communication during field trips or sporting events, or other.
That's a misspelling.
Yeah, that's a misspelling. Or other miscellaneous school-related activities. And then what I did was I parsed out a guideline for each of those types of communication. First, the following guidelines will be in effect to implement this policy. Email. Staff may communicate with students only via the approved district email account. 2, any email communication must have an educational purpose and be related to current coursework. 3, any inappropriate student-initiated contact must be forwarded to the immediate supervisor. Staff may communicate with parents in whatever email system that is most convenient. So it's an attempt not to really, if you want to give a teacher or whatever your Gmail account, so be it, as a parent. So that's that first part. Under text and cell phone communication, staff may communicate via text and cell phones under limited circumstances as follows. During out-of-district events such as athletic events, competitions, or other similarly related activities. B, the advisor must secure a district-provided cell phone. C, the request for district cell phones shall be made in writing at least 2 weeks in advance of the need for such phones. D, all district cell phones will be returned after each event with a record of all necessary text messages. And E, staff may freely communicate with parents via text messages or personal cell phones as needed. The operational way that would happen is we have, I've already talked to our technology department. We would be able to make certain cell phones that would be fully equipped and functional available for up to, we figured we'd need probably no more than 4 phones available for that purpose at any one given time. And they would be district owned, and we would authorize any employees that would be out on these kind of events, in the event that they actually need to do this, that they would be available for their use. The whole point, again, is to get away from the inability to monitor what happens. And social media and Facebook, Twitter, etc., teachers should not communicate with students via any social media, Facebook or Twitter. If students attempt to initiate contact via social media, staff should refer the matter to the administration, and staff may freely communicate with students' parents as needed via any social media. So that's our attempt to try to make it as user-friendly as possible without putting too many loopholes in that just create a non-policy.
So I just want to, just for clarification, understand. So if I hear this policy correctly, I think the driver here is to make sure you have monitoring capabilities of what's going on.
Oversight would be
oversight, correct.
And the ability to look at what happened.
Okay, so you have a history record of what's going on as far as text messaging, emails, and obviously you don't want to use any kind of social media at all because it's unsecure. Okay. Just want to make sure.
I think my biggest concern is that there've been enough cases out there where, you know, a predator gets their hands on a child's personal information. Either it's their phone number so they can text them, or it's an email account or something else, and that's when it opens the door and a relationship starts. And you know, whatever we can do to not foster that dissemination of that private contact information, then I think we should not be open.
Frankly, if I may interrupt, this policy doesn't give me 100% comfort, because there still could be the possibility that a phone number comes in from an outside source to and someone can take a pencil, not that I'm accusing anyone of ever doing this, but if you're so inclined, even just manipulate the system. I can't create a 100% safety net.
I think that's the issue that I was going to bring up here. I mean, a couple of things I was going to say on this is number 3 in the first set of bullet points. Any inappropriate student-initiated contact must be forwarded to the immediate supervisor. And I would even say you got to define what inappropriate is. It may not just be the language of it. I think it's inappropriate for a student to use their own personal phone to communicate with, you know what I mean, or their own personal email account. That would be, in my definition, inappropriate.
Okay.
Instead of just reporting it out to the supervisor, which is what they should be doing also, but they also shall not reply to that student through that form. You know what I'm saying? Because as soon as someone sends an email to me and I'm a faculty member and it comes from their personal Gmail account or whatever, and now I reply to them, now I'm fostering that, you know, that communication. I shouldn't even reply to them. I just go straight to the...
Again,
you know what I'm saying?
I appreciate that input. Just you need to know when you write these things, it's almost...
No, I'm not saying, I'm just saying I would add, that's my personal opinion.
I think that's a good point.
The other part of this, skipping down to the bottom under social media, it says teachers should not, and I would have here shall not. Instead, wherever you have should, I'd have shall. Because what somebody should or shouldn't be doing is different than what they shall be doing. I
had the same intent as the word, but if you want a different word, that's fine.
Should is kind of more fudgeable than shall.
Well, I can tell you when I wrote it, there was no fudge factor in the word should, but
no, I got it.
Changed the word.
Well, when you read it, you actually said shall. So.
Oh, did I?
Yeah.
That's
in 1, that's in 2, and I'd also in number 2 say that they shall not reply in some, whatever language you use above, I'd use it down there.
Okay.
And I personally still have, I guess I have some more questions regarding the middle section of text cell phone communication. Is what's being proposed here that, let's say these guys go to a TSA competition somewhere, that she would get a district phone, and then we're going to issue 4 other district phones for volunteers and or students to use? Or you're going to just say, hey, look,
that's going to be my question.
I'm a student, you get 25 students, and all 25 students are going to be able to communicate to that district phone via their own personal phone numbers and email accounts, because otherwise, why even bother with it at all? Because, as you said, nothing stops that person from saying, all right, well, that's so-and-so's telephone number, that's so-and-so's email address, and that's so-and-so's whatever.
Well, that's my point.
And that's no disrespect. That's real, that means no disrespect.
I need to point something out. This is stemming from, and I know there's been several cases over the past couple months around the county, but there are laws in place. There are federal laws in place to stop this kind of stuff happening. If the people are willing to break the law, no policy written is going to stop them. So nitpicking all of this, and I do understand where you're coming from a board and from an administration. You don't want that happening in your district. But if people are willing to break the law,
But there is no law that says
you're not allowed
a
to.
teacher can't have a communication with the student on a cell phone.
But there are laws that say you can't have a relationship.
Oh
with a
yes,
minor.
but it's too late then. I mean, we're trying to stop it sooner. This policy, I totally agree with you. This policy is not going to, if there's going to be an inappropriate relationship,
It's going to happen.
This policy is not going to stop that from happening. It's going to happen. But what this policy is going to do is give us what we need to say, you just broke a rule. It's not a federal rule you broke by talking to that student, but you broke our rule. Now we can do something about it. But right now we can't do anything about it. If we find out
No, we can we can only do something about it after the damage is done.
records, they're having this communication with the teacher. Well, what are we going to do about it? We can't do it unless it's really inappropriate at that point. We can't do anything about it. But now if we have a policy in place, we can say, well, now we can do something about it before it gets to that point. And that's kind of what we're trying to get out of this policy, and not handcuff some of the things you need to do at the same time.
Now, I did have several parents who were unable to come tonight send me emails kind of explaining their views on this. And one of the common themes across several of these emails was the parents, and if you want me to read, I have 5 of them here. They're not very lengthy, but I can read them if you want. But one of the things that has come across several of them is a reference to a permission slip, stating that the parent signs, stating that I am okay with X teacher or X coach having my child's cell phone number for communication that is solely based on the purpose of the club or the activity or the sport.
Well, this is my response to that would be this. We're going to get that anyway, even if it's on a district cell phone. So if they want to give that permission, yeah, we'll grant that permission, but it's only going to happen on district-owned cell phone that we can monitor, not on your personal phone.
But the other issue you run into that, let's say you have 20 children, and 7 of them have permission and the other ones don't. I mean, now the teacher's got to figure out, well, who can I send an email to? Who can, it's just...
What if it's a split family? What if the kids don't live with the mother or the father, they live with the grandparents? Who do you get the guardian to come in? What if they live half time with the father, half time with the mother? You have to get mother and father.
I can't solve all the problems, but one of the things I would suggest is you use the phone system, for a lot of this type of stuff where it works so well now. Why can't I have in the phone system, which I always forget the name of that thing, ConnectEd. Why can't you have a distribution list? Oh, I'm going out to this event with 20 kids. Give me a distribution list of those 20 kids. Now the teacher can just call in and record a message, and it'll go right to those 20 kids' phones, if they have phones, and they'll get the message. And now you've got a buffer in between there where the teacher doesn't know exactly what phone number it called.
Yeah, I don't know if that's, I've never been, I
I'm
imagine
just saying,
that.
think outside the box on how we can communicate.
Well, I think they want some instantaneous.
Look, all these phones, you can communicate via email too.
Not every student has data.
Okay,
plan.
well,
They text themselves.
Their parents might.
Just use ConnectEd. I mean, that solves that problem.
Right, but if you're...
Look, somehow all of us in this room got through our education without a cell phone.
You're right, but we're
And
not in that time frame.
we managed to go to outside events. We manage to go to athletic events in other places, stay in hotels, all those types of things. And we manage to do it without the use of a cell phone. Somehow we all survive. I find it incredulous that we can't operate at these extracurricular events having to use a child's phone or a personal email account to do it. And if you read some of the newspaper articles about how these relationships started between these faculty members and these students, it starts off with the text messages, and it starts off with the email messages, and then it goes to Facebook or some other place. And from there, it develops into a relationship. You close that door, you just made it that much more difficult for that predator to get a hold of that kid and start what seems to be an innocent relationship at first and develops into something else.
But do you know that the way your policy is written right now, I have a teenage daughter.
We're trying to correct what we have the problem with.
I understand that, but according to this, I'm not allowed to call her friends if she's not answering her cell phone. Because I am a staff member and an employee of Daniel Boone District. I'm not allowed to have any phone contact with any students.
You're only a staff member when you're participating in the event that's happening. If you're here on the building, and I would say that you shouldn't be using your phone to make those kinds of phone calls.
But it says calling students on cell phones or allowing students to make personal calls to them unrelated to homework, classwork, and school district sponsored or sanctioned student activities. On the weekend, my daughter plays.
Right. I raised that same point at the meeting. That was the point because my wife's a volunteer, and she's got my son's friends' phone numbers.
And as
a volunteer now, okay, does she have to wipe those phone numbers off? It's there's problems there that we need to satisfy with changing some of this
policy. People that live within this district. And as a parent, my parent responsibilities are going to trump any policy.
I get it. Look, at the end of the day, though, all of us, some of us work for private organizations, right, where you have a work number and you have your personal number. You have a work phone. Some people walk around with 2 phones, one for business, one for personal use. When you're on the job and you're using your corporate phone and your corporate account to make those calls, when you're at home, you can do whatever you want with your personal phone.
And nowadays, a lot of people don't have landlines; they only have cell phones.
I'm just saying, though,
so it's
we can make a distinction here, and I think the health, safety, welfare of a child exceeds any inconvenience that is raised. That's my personal opinion. I would never want my child exposed to something that could lead to some sort of inappropriate behavior. And it happens. It's happened here. It's happened in school districts all around us with regularity and frequency. This isn't a one-off event.
You are absolutely correct. But what you're suggesting is that we are going to cocoon our children.
I didn't say that.
Yeah, we're saying we can't trust anyone that is hired within this district by creating such a stringent. And I believe, yes, we need to protect our children, but you have to have a little bit of trust. And if people are willing to break a law, why do you think that something so stringent here is going to stop them?
What's the change that you would recommend on this policy? What do you see that's...
I'm not sure what the change is, because obviously you can't say while on school grounds, that the policy doesn't apply to you once it's after 3 o'clock or 3:30, because...
That's when it happens.
Because that's when it happens.
Right.
So where do you find the balance? And I think that this, while its intention was good, was a knee-jerk reaction to CYA, and some situations weren't taken into consideration, or it was, well, that's kind of out of the realm and we just won't kind of look at that. A teacher, high school students babysit. People that work in this district are going to call or text their babysitter.
Look, I can't control... You can't. We can't control what happens outside of it, but we can control what happens in the school district.
But the way that this is worded, you're trying to.
No, this controls what happens while that person is working for the school district. And quite frankly, this isn't a knee-jerk reaction. We started looking at this, I want to say, 2 years ago when we were looking at the activity committee for the first time. And I asked for a roster of all students participating in a particular athletic or non-athletic event. Just wanted a roster. And what I got were lists of students with all their phone numbers and email addresses on them. Personal email addresses and personal phone numbers. 2 years ago. That's when we brought this up and said we got to do something about that.
Because that's a security issue.
Prior to any issue happening here or in other districts, it was widely publicized. And when I saw that, my gut reaction as a parent was, I wonder how many of these parents know this particular person has access to all these kids' personal information.
I can tell you for certain every parent of mine knows that I have their
Yours
kids' phone number.
might, but
But
not
maybe
every
that's something
teacher.
that
We got
needs to
200
get-
some odd employees in this school district,
But
right?
then maybe that's something that needs to get put out there, that we have to inform the parents of this. And here's my other part to this whole thing. I am being entrusted to take kids to literally a hotel for 3 nights, and I can't send them a text message?
Yeah, you can on the phone we give you.
Okay,
What's the problem with that? I'm
okay,
still at a loss.
What if you take
But
the
when
opposite?
this was
I mean,
originally
what if you
brought
take the
up, there
opposite?
was
What if-
nothing in there about that.
What if there's a
But that's why
student
we
that
went
you
back to
take-
we promised that we would go back to the table to try to make this as palatable to our need to ensure everyone's safety with the need for you to do that.
I don't mind using a district phone.
Well, that's my point. So if there's not a problem using a district phone, I'm trying to understand what the general problem is with what was put on paper.
But now with the district, well, see, I didn't know about these guidelines that you wrote up.
But that was, and I understand that it's because we just presented them new, but that was the direction from the board to come back with some guidelines after we passed the policy in anticipation of some pushback on this. And that's what this is designed to do.
And I think that policy helps in some wording, preventing the student from getting your number, not just you getting the student's number that we don't trust you. But now let's say you've got a student who for some reason has this infatuation with you. And they've got
I think it
phone
protects
number.
both sides.
And then they're going to start texting you and
Tell
calling
the
you.
difference
It's
between
just...
infatuation, and if you're asking the teacher a question about, you're down in room B at the conference, you're in room C, and something just happened to our project and we're missing material.
Send a runner.
As opposed to,
You send a
I
runner.
really like your dress. There's
Right, and that's what we do.
Somebody gets
But
down there, they walk and find a teacher.
Yeah,
and
but
have a
it's not that
conversation.
easy at these conferences.
It may not be easy, but that's the way it works.
It's huge.
But it doesn't work.
She needs to have.
Honest to God, come with me to the state conference.
I've been,
and
listen,
see
I go to
this.
national conferences, okay, where sometimes you're in a building and you don't get cell phone reception, and you're with a large group of people, and you can't communicate to them because your cell phone doesn't work. What do? You get up and you
Kelly
walk
would
and
like.
find
Can
them.
we,
Yeah,
can
let's
we
get
let
some
Kelly
audience
say something?
comments here.
The policy says that the teacher is allowed to contact the student at an activity outside of the district. But if she is allowed to contact our personal phone, why not give district phones to the students so that we are giving our actual numbers to the district so no one can get that?
Yeah, that was my question.
That's what you raised, Andy,
On the
right?
district
That's
phone,
what
am I
that's the
allowed
question I
to,
asked.
on
What's
the
that?
district phone?
Are the kids also getting a district phone? Or else it's useless?
You're going to give me a
Will it be
budget
there?
to buy 250
But no, that
new
was his
phones.
question,
No.
Well, that's my question, is that if, let's say, for example, you got 20 kids, and I'm assuming you don't go it alone to these things, right? You might have a
No, I
volunteer.
do have parents that go with me.
Okay, so you got a couple of volunteers. So do the students need the phones, or do you give the phones out to the teacher, the coach, and the volunteers? Like when I was younger, we'd go out and we'd be staying at hotels, not only for a competition, but sometimes overseas. We'd have chaperones with us. Well, hey, you know what? There were a certain number of chaperones, and they were in charge of a certain number of students to oversee them. And if we had to get in touch with each other, those chaperones were coordinating where you're going to be, at what time, and what's going to happen, all those types of things. Stuff happens all over the place. People get sick, they don't show up, they're missing something, who knows what. And somehow we managed to survive all of that and still enjoy the experience. And I guess what I'm not suggesting is every student gets a phone, but maybe every faculty person has one, and faculty people communicate, and then so-and-so's over there, and you got a chaperone with them.
I only mentioned 4 phones at this point because
Whatever the number of
that's
phones
a starting
is,
point.
whatever's appropriate. My concern is at the end of the day, I think what we're doing is we're saying, hey, look, the majority of the time, this isn't going to be a problem, so we don't need to worry about it. I'm worried about the minority of the time where these circumstances happen, because it doesn't happen a lot, but it does happen with more frequency than everybody would, I think, care to admit. And the problem is, it's all fine for us to sit here and say it never happened on my watch, but when it's your kid, it's too late.
I'm not arguing that part.
Okay? These kids are impacted for the rest of their lives by something terrible that happens to them.
Absolutely.
And we ought to be focused on that, not on how inconvenient it is for somebody to get up and run somewhere and ask a question or get an envelope or whatever it is they need to do to be successful in whatever project they're doing.
But on the text
Somebody else's
messages,
safety supersedes.
unless they put them in as a contact, it's just going to have a phone number. It's not going to say John Smith. It's just going to have a phone number. So
I
if a
think I
group
have a
message
good idea
is
who it
sent,
is that sent me the text.
but if they're sending out a group to all of the students to their personal cell phones, it's just going to list numbers. And unless that person's already a contact, you're not going to know that phone number is tied to that person.
What if you need that person and you don't know which phone number?
The only person that would be doing it would be the adults.
So on the district phone, would I be permitted to put the students' cell phone numbers in that district phone and use that at the conference to communicate with them? Because there are times where we will have a set time for lunch where
I would say yes to that because that's part of all we want is the ability to know what happened. I mean, technically, under this policy, you could use that phone on a phone call to do something inappropriate. We can't control it 100%, but it just you would be a little bit more uneasy as a predator if you're using a district phone and thinking that, maybe something can happen to
I
this.
still don't like the idea of that. I don't like the idea of the phone number being given out.
Well, then we'll shut down all communication.
I'm not telling you what, I'm just telling you what my concerns
You
are.
can wipe it clean.
You're still giving the
Put a new
person the
number on
kid's
there.
phone number.
You can have set up your distribution list with the permission of the parents. Wipe it clean when the event's done. Reprogram the phone.
Well, there's nothing stopping someone from taking a pencil and writing that stuff down. I get the point.
If they want to do something, they're going to figure out a way to do
There's
it.
nothing
And
for
you don't
them.
need a cell phone to do something. Honestly.
Whatever it's called, Easy Track or whatever the thing is, and pulling up a student's ID and all the personal information during the school days. If they want the phone number, they're going to get the phone number.
It's a different scenario if the culture is people know what they're not supposed to be doing, right? So if the culture is students know they're not supposed to be giving out their cell phone numbers under any circumstance to a teacher, or they're not supposed to be giving out their personal email account or whatever the future holds in terms of communication, Facebook, social media, whatever it is, to a faculty member. That's the understood culture, and vice versa, right? Now when you have a coach saying, well, look, we're going to a competition. I really need your phone. I got a district phone, but send it to, go ahead and email me. Well, then now you have somebody of authority, putting that authority and that power over somebody who's a child or a minor, and that might say, okay, well, maybe in this one instance it's okay, and I'll give it to you. Well, then that predator comes back and says, okay, well, you're in my class too. Why don't we communicate on, and then, look, that's how they work it. It doesn't start off like, hey, I think you're pretty, let's go do, something. It starts off like, hey.
Somebody's name and get their email and get their phone number.
Look, this isn't an issue of going through the phone book. This is an issue of, in your capacity as a faculty person, in the employ of the school district, okay? Not enabling you to have access to a student's phone. I find it remarkable that we're even having this argument.
Anybody's email and phone number.
I have to say,
You can stalk somebody's house, but you're not doing it on.
Find a way. We're talking about going to a competition. I probably spent $600 or $700 last year on TSA for Kelly to go to TSA. Every year that she's competed with Mrs. Hallman, I've never had any bullshit. I've never had any problem with Mrs. Hallman at all. Kelly's
We're not
place
accusing
every
Mrs. Hallman
year
of
that she's
anything,
gone.
by the way.
But this is because this is important to her. So I told her that I would come tonight.
I understand.
And Kelly enjoys it. I've never had any problem with her. But when you go to Seven Springs Resort, that is huge. It is absolutely huge. And Kelly wasn't very well. Kelly has a problem with her back. She has a wall issue. And I need to have some sort of contact with Ms. Hall. Kelly did not feel good. She said, if Kelly does not feel better, you're going to have to drive out and pick her up. If there's not supposed to be any communication, well then...
She can call you.
Kelly not call you?
She can call you.
What if she can't get a hold of me? And
What about your next...
Well, that's not a function of a cell phone.
No, Kelly was sick up in her room. Kelly didn't show up for a competition. Mrs. Hallman texted Kelly to find out where she was at. Kelly said, I'm not feeling good. And Mrs. Hallman in turn had to call me.
She could text the district cell phone that we're going to give her.
Well,
As long as the district cell phone, I have access to the kids. That's all I'm asking.
At the end of the day, if
But you
you're
can
gonna
call a
do
room
something-
too, right? The room you're staying in, the hotel room, has a phone.
If she's sick in the room, what if she's sick in the hallway or in the bathroom or in the... Seven Springs Resort is And the kids like to compete, but they should have some way of contact. And I don't have a problem with doing a permission slip.
I understand the points. I go through this all the time. Believe me, the job I do is very secure. I have to go through this issue constantly. I understand the issues with the predators. I have experience with that as well. If that's big of a concern, maybe these cell phones just need to have some encryption on it. Maybe with the authorization of the parents with the numbers. Give it to a central point here. Have that individual input the numbers. It's encrypted. You don't have to see the numbers, but it gives them the ability to do the text messaging back and forth. There's all kinds of things you can put on these phones today.
See, and the problem, and I expressed it when it was first brought up in opposition to this, was that, yeah, I trust Mrs. Holman, and I trust, most of the people, but obviously, we open this up to one group, it's going to be all of them, and we've lost containment again. We might as well have done nothing and had no response to this at all. I'm not ready to do that at all.
No, I agree. I think once we allow cell phones back in, they're going to start just giving out numbers.
To these competitions out of their pocket. That would mean I would spend $800 for one competition so that I could keep my eye on my daughter instead of being able to have her text.
And Robert was there, and you weren't even able to stay with Amir.
No. My judging, also acted as a parent, and when I had opportunities, I would walk around. I don't think that's the issue. It really comes down to the fact that this is concerned about child predication, having that ability to have that connection between the child and a potential predator, whether it's a parent, whether it's a teacher, whoever the case may be. The school already has a lot of contact information already. You guys keep it in a secure web page as it is now. You have access through it, through your system. This is all I'm suggesting. When you have these competitions, you can have these phones set up so you can monitor them. You can secure the phones down. They can be encrypted. You cannot even see what's on some of those phones. Very simple software can give you that ability to do such a thing. And that, wipe the phones clean when the competition's done. Hand the school phone back over.
No, I think that would work. I mean, I'm not familiar with that software that does that, but if there's something there that does what you're suggesting, that'll work. Why wouldn't that work? Right? You got a list of 10 kids on a phone. All you got is their names. You don't know what their phone numbers are.
10, she says.
Whatever. 50 kids on the phone. They have their names listed, not their numbers.
One name.
That's a district phone.
Everything else.
And then I can contact them during the event. When the event's over.
If there's a technology solution to this, so be it. I just don't think...
I don't know if that's software, but do you know what it is?
I don't think students should be communicated on with private, monitoring. An individual's... If I didn't work here at Daniel Boone and I wanted to start texting kids in Daniel Boone with this, no. Sorry. That's out of bounds.
Yeah, I'm not disagreeing with you, Diana. I'm saying using your phones.
Well, that's why I said if there's a technology solution to this, we'll certainly seek it out. Yeah. But I just...
too, if you're doing for the competitions, if she takes 40 kids to regionals or 100 to states, because this is the largest TSA group.
We have 100 kids this year.
They've never had that many kids, so there's a ton of kids that, through word of mouth or whatnot, got involved in this, and they love the group, and the group is good. Like a lot of the groups that they have. If you can rotodial 1,000 kids to let them know that there's going to be a 2-hour delay. Isn't there a way for the competitions that you can say, I want to rotodial 40 kids, tell them to be down for lunch at 12 o'clock?
Right.
I don't know that. I don't know that.
If you can do that, I get calls all the time. We had a bomb threat, or we want to do what was that group that they had in the summer to make Boone a better school, stuff like that. If you can rotodial that, can't you somehow have them program it to rotodial for different...
I honestly don't know.
Someone you've never used that when you were traveling, that ConnectEd feature?
We're not allowed.
Okay.
I don't think ConnectEd is what they're looking for. They want to be able to text somebody in their room.
No, but that's
to tell them to come down. It's time to compete.
Options here. There's not one solution.
And that's all I'm recommending here. There are some definite options on the table that I think the policy can be in place, utilized, that protects the students. I just think it needs to take a little bit more time to look into it. That's all I'm suggesting.
So let's get back to the policy for a second. The policy that you just read here, was this the same policy that we discussed at the...
This is the guideline.
It's the guideline.
Is this the same guideline that we discussed at the board that pulled it back?
No, it's the guideline connected to the policy. The policy says you can't text with people on your private phones.
And I would agree with that too.
That's all the policy says.
I have a question. I just need clarification here, because every year when we get close to competition time, in emails to parents, because I have a distribution list to all of the parents, I send out my cell phone number to them. They know my number because the kids are working at on their competitions at home. They're working on them during the weekends, and I tell them if they have questions, they are to call me. Now, the kids are typically calling me from their home number, and in the way the policy is written, it does say that they're not limited to personal calls that are related to homework, classwork, and school district-sponsored sanctioned student activities. So in that respect, would that be allowed? That a student would call me, if I supply my phone number, call me with a question about a competition they're doing. I've been on the phone with parents about competitions and stuff.
This says clearly that teachers and parents can communicate. I mean, that clearly is spelled out here.
Right, but there have been times that a parent will go, here, you talk to her, you know what you're saying.
Well, that's fine, so long as you're not doing it on the kid's cell phone.
You're doing it on
what
the
if they
parents'
call
phone?
me on their cell phone? How do I control that?
If you're calling the parents and...
No, they're calling me.
I'm saying, though, if you're giving out your phone number,
Right.
that student's calling you back from their cell phone, I think that's where we want to communicate to the student. No. Pick up the house phone, a phone that belongs to your parents to make that phone call.
Okay,
That's all I'm saying.
But if they're calling me and I don't have them in my phone, how do I know what they're calling me on?
You don't, but I mean, I think that's
Okay.
the purpose of the policy, is to communicate to the students. Look, you're a teacher, right? You're going to be working with these kids. You're going to have to explain the policy to them, right? Look, you guys can never contact me via Facebook, social media of any kind. You can't contact me from a personal email account, and I don't want you calling me from your personal cell phone. You want to get in touch with me? Pick up your parents' house line, pick up your parents' cell phone, send me an email versus the dboon.org,
Okay,
system.
but the fact that I give them my phone number, that's okay.
Those are the appropriate methods for communicating.
Okay, then I haven't, well, before this was ever put in place, then I...
We don't have a policy right now, right? So that's the issue. We're trying to put something in place.
Right, and I just want all things considered, because, and I mean, I can pass these emails to you and you can read them, but I know, like one of them says, I do, however, feel strongly that text communication at the conferences are a safety measure, and I sincerely hope it doesn't go away. Last year when Maddie was slotted to attend states, I had several reservations about her being so far from home, but it was the communication process that you used and the constant contact that I knew was happening that made me feel reassured. Not only were you able to reach out to all of the kids in attendance to coordinate meals, team meetings, etc., but I knew she was also able to reach out to you and the other chaperones. While I agree with the board ruling on a routine basis, these conferences are different. Taking away the connection between staff and students and chaperones, in my mind, creates a safety concern when the kids are far from home.
Well, we think we're getting closer to addressing that specific issue in some of the things that
are after the revisions to the policy here also.
Right.
When you're at that conference that is so far away, and because of my own personal budget, it's really not in my money to spend $400 on myself to go with Kelly. I would rather pay the $400 and give her the opportunity to go, because we didn't have clubs like that when I went to school. I went to Catholic school. We didn't really have clubs. For Kelly to be able to go, and you want to limit the contact to what she has with the chaperones and the moderators there, you're not doing anything to prevent any type of, stranger from another school to say, hey, I want to talk to you, and
right.
You want to be friends. Kelly made a lot of friends there. And they give the kids, that's what they do now. That's the first thing they do. They give out their cell phone number. They Facebook each other. So she's not going to be able to talk to her. But what's to prevent some other teacher that's...
Yeah, I think we're beyond that. I think the board has already taken steps to try to open up that communication by the use of the Daniel Gould prescribed cell phones here. And I think, again, I think someone needs to take another extra step and maybe look at some other specific technologies to address the issues of the phone numbers being shown on the phone. I'm pretty sure there's some stuff out here that can help you with that.
Well, you have a call block too. If somebody tries to contact you and that number's not programmed in that phone, they shouldn't be able to get to the phone.
So if I were to give my daughter my phone to go to a conference, that would be okay.
It's your phone.
My phone. So if I would say, here, Caitlin, you're
Yeah,
going
but
to the
here's the
state
difference. Is
conference.
your daughter isn't walking around with your phone 24/7, right?
Yeah.
So if a predator now has that number and calls at
No,
stores,
I'm talking
I'm
about
saying,
the
no, hold on a second. Hold on a second. You give your daughter your phone to participate in whatever, whether it's that conference or it's field hockey or something like that, right? Okay? The difference is, you know, at the end of the day, we're not trying to, I mean, I think you're walking too far away from this. We're not preventing faculty members from communicating with the students. We're not doing that at all, which is what that letter seems to intone. What we're saying is there's an appropriate medium for that communication to occur, and it's a medium that's controlled by the district in some fashion, okay? And that's what we're trying to get our arms around. And it's a different story if I hand my kid my phone and say, okay, call the teacher, right? I know if the teacher or whoever that person is now, volunteer, teacher, coach, whoever it is, has my number, right? So if the phone rings at 7, 8 o'clock at night, I'm the one picking up my phone, not my kid. And then I'm like, well, why are you calling me? Oh, I want to talk to your daughter. About what? What are you calling my daughter at 8 o'clock at night about? Now, as a parent, I've got some sense of control as to what's happening here, right?
Right. Well, when we went to the national conference, I'll tell you, there was one time that the schedule changed and texted us and said, you need to be down here now.
We get it. Look,
and
we get it. And this isn't a war on TSA, okay, and the competition.
But
this
it's
is
affecting TSA.
Well,
I
we're
just feel
affecting
like we
all
use
groups.
it.
And whatever we do for TSA, we got to do for everybody, right? You understand that? It's universal. We can't say, okay, we're only going to make an exception for TSA, but football, field hockey, band, all these other coaches, we're doing something.
Well, let's
completely
hold on.
So-
Let's try to take this a step at a time because it is very complicated. And I'm directing this to, well, Connor's on the phone anymore, but to you folks specifically.
He signed off.
Let's look specifically at this event type of thing, where you're away at an event. And we take Dr. Otto's approach and we give the teacher a district-provided cell phone. And the technology exists that we discussed that that can be pre-coded with phone numbers of folks who are going to be at that event.
I think that's a good solution.
Well, are we okay with that? Or do we have any discussion or arguments with that?
I still feel like the day comes when somebody has the phones from the district, there's going to be another team that needs those phones. They're going to say, you know, the district doesn't have those phones available to us. So guess what? Everybody, let's just start texting because it's not our fault we don't have a phone. It's the district's fault. So now they start texting all over again and blame it on the district as if they didn't have phones for us, they had them for some other group, and now we're stuck. I mean, it's going to be a snowball to every group. This group is here today. I've been to OM competitions. It's chaotic with the little kids. But when something broke and something went wrong, we sent a runner down to find the coach. They fixed it. It was done. It was.
But it's a different.
And you're a group.
But OM is different than.
But it was a national. It was OM. You're talking about football teams, basketball teams, all these different teams that go all these places. The band. Someone is going to be in conflict with those phones.
So Monica, at this point, is your position that you still feel like we should not use it, period?
I don't think we should use it.
Then how do you contact if you're...
I like when an instructor, a teacher, a coach, someone goes to their Daniel Boone email account, they text me. Pardon me?
The kids don't have the email.
Well, you can communicate with their parents. And
6
So then the parents
No,
get
no,
the
I'm
email
saying on
and
a
the parents
normal
have to
basis.
Oh, yeah, I don't care about it. On day to day, I don't care. I'm concerned with
I
the
don't think
conference.
you need a phone for your events. You've been doing fine.
I have
But
always
now
used a phone. I've never not used one.
Okay, well, I think going back to the time when people didn't have cell phones, we still survived on these.
We did.
But now
Times
have
now.
changed,
You're not
and
gonna
now
stop that.
everything revolves around a phone.
That is technology, evolutions. You're
And
not
we
going
can't
to
go
stop the
backwards.
use of technology.
I don't think you're going to stop
How you
human
manage it is
nature
another
either.
story.
And human nature is going to dictate if there's a way for them to do something wrong with information they're
That's
going.
correct. But that's where the policy is going to protect the board, the school, and any teachers here also. That's the whole intent
I
of
think
this
the current
policy.
policy we passed is more stringent than what we're presenting tonight.
It is.
The
The guideline was intended to,
Yeah, well, this, I don't agree with this. I just don't. I don't agree
I
with
mean,
that.
my opinion on it, and we can wrap, I mean, because we're not going to solve it tonight.
Yeah.
My opinion is if you're going to issue a district phone, then I'm okay with that so long as somehow students aren't using somehow either if they're using their personal phones, that information is masked, it's screened, it's a blind call. Okay, so that if I'm trying to get in touch with student Jay Smith or whatever, it's I'm sending somehow that Jay Smith's number or contact.
You're basically making it a walkie-talkie.
Yeah, it's a walkie-talkie.
Who would have an issue of having a walkie-talkie?
It's a Nextel phone, right? Look, in my business in construction.
Well, no, we don't have Nextels.
No, I'm saying is we've had hundreds of employees with the Nextel phone, and they can only use it to call other Nextel phones on our list. You couldn't use it for any other use, right? And I'm trying to get in touch with that person. I know how to get a hold of them, and then vice versa. It's a company phone. And they can't use it for some other thing. And when the day's done, the phone's done. Okay, and if there's a way to do that type of system that it prevents an event for somebody, the wrong person, getting the wrong information, then I guess I'm all right with it. But at the end of the day, I'm very. I don't know how you work that plan out. If the technology is available to do it, then we do it. It's 4 walkie-talkies that go off to an event. There's 4 walkie-talkies that go off to an event. Or it's 4 cell phones that have masked calling. I don't know.
And that number could be wiped clean also.
Yeah. And I want to just bring this out there, and I know that I'm specific to TSA, but now we've gone to the state conference for 4 years, and all 4 years, all of those kids that have my cell phone number, and I've had all of theirs. And the way I communicated with them was with phone calls and text messaging. That's how we knew where things were. Every year that I have been there has been some situation I have had to diffuse. The one year I had to send someone home because in joking around, he threatened to kill another student. I was on the phone with Mr. Henkel at 11 o'clock at night. That student called me, and that's when we were up in the villas, and I was down in the conference center. That student had to get a hold of me. He felt threatened. Another year last year, I was dealing with some suicide stuff. Those kids had to be able to contact me. And it wasn't suicide, well, the one was anyway. But they had to be able to contact me for a safety measure. And that's where a lot of the parents are just voicing their opinion for safety. They feel most comfortable that this kids can contact me and I can contact them. And if it's through a district phone, hey, I'm fine with that, as long as I have access to those kids and they have access to me.
I'm actually okay with that as well.
I'm totally good with that.
What I'm not okay with, honestly, and I think we solved that event. I don't think we solved it because you're not comfortable. I don't want to say that. But I think we're closer to discussing, a way it could work. With technology. What I'm not okay with, and I don't want to open this can of worms up because we can go on for another couple hours, but I'm not okay with them having your cell phone to call you up with the problem. When I got a problem with my homework assignment, they have your cell phone number. I've got a problem with that.
Well,
I think you should have some kind of, I don't know, some alternate phone number that's provided to you by the school district that forwards to your cell phone. Or something like that.
Well, no. I mean, you can have the voicemail box.
They don't have. I don't think kids should not get your personal cell phone number.
Well, and with this in place, in the years past, the parents have always had my cell. And the parents have had my cell phone number before the kids ever got a hold of it. The parents knew that number, and the parents were the ones that were told, if you have questions, contact me. And my phone bill month of the conference is $100 over what it normally is.
I think your personal cell phone is your personal cell phone, period. And for anybody to call you, whether a parent or a student, on your personal cell phone number, I just don't think that's right. And I realize it's done and everybody does it, but I just don't think that's right. I think there needs to be some phone number that goes through the district with control.
I have to agree.
That's where the issue runs. It's not a special event.
Today, I would be very concerned about having children contacting me on any of my personal devices and phones today. Just for my own.
Right, for your own protection, right?
Period.
Well, the BTI where I work has
text and email, then you can monitor it. Yeah, you can monitor emails.
BTI would not allow any instructor to give out their personal phone numbers. You had to go through the district. BTI had a phone system set up. You plugged into it. The students called. that phone number, you could plug into it anywhere, your home, your cell phone, anywhere, to
You know,
get your
that's
messages.
fine, because
But
that
BPI did
kids
not
could
allow
actually
any
get to
instructor to
contact
give
her.
out any personal information,
Right.
and nor
But
was.
that also protects her.
Right, exactly. Right.
Because you don't want somebody coming back and saying she did something inappropriate, or a coach or anybody.
That's exactly right.
So if
takes is
she
an
had a
accusation.
district phone that she could use for the competitions, that the kids could email her on, text her, it protects the kids,
Yeah.
and it protects.
And again, I don't think it's the
staff.
competition thing. I think it's the
Well, it's
it's
for
the daily
anything.
stuff that, you know, if you've got a homework assignment.
Well, and
I
I
can't hear you say that.
Contact her so she can help them. If you can't get in contact with her, there could be all this other stuff. And last year when there was that suicidal person, I had to deal with that firsthand because I had somebody in my room that had to deal with that. So if they weren't able to contact Mrs. Holman, then that person might have been dead by now.
But we keep circling around this event thing, and it's,
I know that there's other chaperones.
Other people around that you can reach out to, but I think the issue here is that we're broaching is if you have a blind call system,
Well, actually, I think they
that
still do their
robocalls.
rooms to
I mean, look, you can do this all the time. You can have people call in to an answering service and turn around and call out again, or it's a call forwarding system. Call an 800 DBOO number, and the 800 DBOO number turns around and calls your personal cell phone number.
Right.
I, as a student, never know what your personal cell phone number is, but I do know what the DBOO number is, and your extension could be 773.
I don't
Who handles the
care.
telephony
I don't-
system here?
I just, my
Technology
only
department.
yeah.
Mr. Haas. So
I think
you know,
we
can we have a
bring him in.
takeaway that we get Mr. Haas in the loop here and tell us what technologies are available that we have right now?
My only thing
and
is
try
I
to
just
solve
want
this.
to be able to contact the kids at these conferences when we are on opposite sides of the conference center. There are times kids are up in the rooms working on videos and other competitions, and they need me, and I'm down in the conference center, or vice versa. I'm
And
up
we
in
will
the-
solve for that
and
problem. We will solve that problem.
This whole district phone with the
We'll
kids'
figure out the way to
names
solve
and
it.
numbers, the numbers being encrypted, I'm good with that. I just want to make sure that there is something in line that I can contact these kids when we go away overnight and their parents are not there. Because
And we agree
I'm
with
the
you.
person.
I mean, look, this health, safety, welfare of the children is why we're having this conversation in the first place. So, you know, it cuts both ways. We're not trying to, and, you know, like I said before, this isn't a communication issue. We're not trying to say you can't communicate or you shouldn't communicate with kids. They're in your care. And vice versa. What we're saying is we've got to find the appropriate medium for that to happen. Okay? And in the absence of the appropriate medium, we want to shut it down until we figure out what the proper way of doing that
As
is.
long as we have something by February 9th.
I think we can probably get something accomplished.
I need something by
But there's
February
obviously
9th.
there's a whole host of other organizations that have the same issues that you have.
Love to party here a little longer, but I definitely.
Say that again?
Take care.
Thank you.
Thanks for
Does
coming.
it not apply to those of us that live in this, like,
No,
my
it's just
question
gonna apply to
regarding,
everybody.
regarding
Yeah.
like my daughter?
For now.
Am I not allowed to have her friend's cell phone numbers?
That's a personal issue outside of school.
No, it's.
But I'm an employee.
See, here's the issue I brought up at the board meeting, and she has the same issue, and we just it's semantics, but we got to figure this out. My wife is a volunteer. She volunteered for the marching band, right? So she's a volunteer now. Is she now supposed to wipe out all the phone numbers she has of my son's friends because she's a volunteer and this policy goes into place? Because now she's in violation of the policy. She's a volunteer with phone numbers of students, even though they're my kids' friends.
Well, I think we probably have to.
But that's
We
the
probably have to.
No, what the policy says is it says you can't communicate with them while you're in that capacity, right?
No.
It says at any time.
It says you
We're
cannot.
starting to get that. with the
There
guidelines,
is
but
no start and end time
I
in
think
this
there's a difference when
policy.
you're a volunteer for band, whatever, let's say it's marching band. You're not on duty at Saturday night at 7 o'clock in the middle of the summer, right?
What if my wife decides to do something? Let's say she's a predator. She ends up being a predator, and she does something. That's when she's going to do it.
Okay,
It's
but
not going to do it while she's at the marching band.
But the difference is she didn't get those phone numbers because she may have gotten the phone numbers now because the district has allowed that sort of communication to exist. But take me, for example. I don't have any affiliation with the school. I have simply going to become a volunteer. You know, at that point in time, there's no way for me to get student phone numbers unless the school district allows me to have that communication with them, right? If the school district says you can't have that kind of communication, how am I supposed to be enabled to do that?
But that's not the question.
You know, I get what you're saying. You're saying, I'm already here, I already have the numbers.
No, I'm saying my daughter's going out on Friday night with a group of friends.
Okay.
You don't get parents' phone numbers anymore. You get their friends' phone numbers. Because if your child's not going to answer their phone,
we can't control what you guys do outside the school district.
That's what this is saying.
No, but she's not.
I'm a district employee.
Okay, so what I was saying is that, you know, I don't know how we handle that, actually, now I'm thinking about it.
Because that puts her in the same situation as me.
I'm going to tell you that your policy is not going to handle 100% of the circumstances.
And
It's not going to do it.
that's what I'm saying. My parental responsibility is going to trump the school district telling me I can't contact these students who happen to be with my child.
Right. That's a gray area.
It's a gray area.
Yeah.
It's not going to deal with all of them.
My son doesn't have a cell phone, but his friends do. When he goes down the block to play, they're outside. I don't call the parents because they're out playing wherever.
No,
I call those friends.
Right. My wife does the same thing.
You know, as they get
calls
older,
his friends saying, "Hey, his friend."
I'm going to sit here and tell you that we could have 8 3-hour discussions like this, and we're never going to solve that.
That was my concern with the way that this was worded. Is that
I can tell you though that if you're working here and it's 9:30 in the morning and you're on school grounds and you're communicating with a student via personal phone, then I would say you're in violation of the policy.
Absolutely, but they should be in school too, so it should all be good.
However that happens,
Right.
if you're in your capacity as an employee and doing whatever it is you're charged with doing, and you're reaching out via personal methods to communicate with other students, even if it's for then I would say that you should be picking up a school district phone, and you should be using a DBoon email account, or whatever our policy states the appropriate format for conversation.
And absolutely.
You're on, it's June 23rd, and you're at the beach, and you're there with 7 kids from Dang and Boone, who haven't even friends with your kids, and you pick up your phone and you call them.
Or it's the weekend.
Well, whatever. I can differentiate in my mind.
And let me extend that out. Let's say Let's say something does come of that.
Always in the role of the teacher.
Let's say something does come of. Let's take your example to its logical conclusion.
Okay.
You have Billy Williams, whoever might you say he's the kid that lives down the block, and you all hang out and you go away on summer vacation. And for some reason, you've gotten a hold of his number. And it's found out later that you guys developed a relationship outside. You know what? That's not on us. You developed that on your own. You got that number from some other source. So be it. The district can't get sucked into that. But if we somehow facilitated you getting that kid's number, then we got a problem. So that's where the difference is.
Yeah, that is.
You understand? I think that clears that up. Because we can't know every... I mean, I was even thinking about this. What if somebody's like a babysitter for somebody? I'm thinking, for God's sakes, I don't want to shut that down. But that kid gave you their number. Probably the parents know about it. You now have it. You happen to be an employee of the district. But you're also a mother who needs some babysitting on a Friday night. If something happens because of that, the district, and that's my job to protect the district's interest, the district's interest is not affected by that. When the police come looking for us, we can say, hey, no, wait a minute. We didn't give her that number. She got it on her own. She didn't get that number in her capacity as an employee.
And we didn't facilitate that either. I mean, like, right now, the way we don't have a policy, so, it's kind of like you're encouraged to use your personal means of communication in all facets of what you're apparently doing, both with the TSA and as a teacher. And as a school district, we need to say, well, look, you as a volunteer, whatever it is you do here as a school district, we don't want to facilitate that. Right. We don't want to say the only way for you to communicate with our students is share personal information. We're saying, no. There's another medium.
See, because how that's different from what you're saying is we're facilitating you getting their numbers by allowing you to say, yes, you can have their numbers. And then the district, by extension, if something happens, a smart lawyer is going to come back to the district and say, what did you do to make sure she didn't get the phone number? And we're going to go, nothing. We didn't do a thing. We just let her have it.
You didn't get their phone numbers.
That's where we get
your role as a district employee. Right. You got their phone numbers some other way. If you're getting those phone numbers or those email accounts as a district employee and it is your capacity as a district employee, that's what we're trying to stop.
Okay. Can that then be worded? Because I know you're not the only parent that has that concern.
I'm not saying this doesn't need some cleaning up. This is a first pass. I mean, I'll concede again. If look, we spent, 90 minutes just on this. My point is it's never going to be total, but I want you to hear the point I just made to her, because she said, how's it different than what happened with her? If we facilitate an employee getting a number and then something bad happens, I'm the shrewd lawyer over here from Madison Avenue that goes, well, Mr. Superintendent, what did you do to ensure that that student's phone number wouldn't get in the hands of the employee? And I go, oh, I didn't do anything.
As a matter of fact,
And we got to do the other way too. Not. Don't give the teacher's number out. That should be private.
No, they sign off on giving information that the parents control. See, this is to me a differentiation between parental control and turning over parental control and letting just students run free. I can tell you just on a personal note, nobody's going to have my kid's number without my permission. And that's just the way it would be. And some people have a different thought on that. That's just the way it is. So
that's why a lot of parents did say that, and I'm going to pass these to you so you can read what the parents said, just so
I'll take them and make sure the committee gets them.
Okay.
Bill, if you want to take that, we'll make sure that gets disseminated.
Thanks for bringing those, by the way.
Oh, you're welcome.
So I guess to be continued.
Yeah, to be continued.
I'll start looking for some technology solutions.
Could we have Mr. Haas join us? We'll put it first on the agenda so he doesn't have to stay. And maybe just tell us.
However you want to. I think we should probably take this up at the next committee of the whole. That's before this committee meets again. This is a big issue. It probably should go back to the full board.
Well, I think we need some. I'd rather go to the board with a solution.
Okay.
Some kind of
I see where you're going with that. So keep it out of the board level for now.
Yeah, until
so come back to the next committee meeting.
Here's things that we.
Okay.
We might be able to do.
He's on.
Some of the solutions
Let him
we
know.
talked about were line calling, voicemail, call forwarding, depot addresses. And because, as Frank pointed out, we don't want students giving their personal information to teachers, but vice versa. Teachers feeling as though they need to give out their personal information to students.
Right.
Okay? And because it can go both ways. You get a student stalking a teacher for crying.
Absolutely.
Right. So,
absolutely.
And I think it would be nice for a teacher to say, hey, I've got a phone, I got my personal phone, and it's truly my personal phone. I don't have, 100 parents who know this phone number and a bunch of kids and everything else. There's got to be some technology that will still allow you to do all the communication you want to do, but have some protection in there as well.
Well, there may be, there may not. I don't know that. So we'll have to take
1-800-Daniel phone number and with different extensions for different teachers.
Right, just an extension.
And they can forward those calls automatically to any number that teacher wants. It's no different than an email account. She can have a deboot account that automatically rolls a message out to her personal account if that's what she wants.
And there may be cost involved with this too. And
I think
it may
it's
be
a
cost that's worth
spending.
Right, that's worth spending. So
there will be a budget
for
this.
The budget time.
Yep.
Right. There may be some cost for it. Well, if that's about it.
Meeting adjourned.
Meeting adjourned.